Thank you to our guest here today. Director Wray, I'd like to start with you. Senator Grassley and Chairman Comer subpoenaed an FBI document containing an allegation regarding a pay-to-play scheme between then Vice President Biden and a foreign national, and your response was due just a little bit earlier today. So my question is, has the FBI complied with the subpoena for this document?
I believe we submitted a lengthy letter earlier today.
A letter, but not the document that was the subject of the subpoena request?
I can't speak to the specific document. We are committed to working collaboratively with both committees, but we also have to balance sources and methods in ongoing investigations, and we will continue to work through the accommodation process as has happened many times in the past.
Was there a plan to submit the document, or will it be never submitted, or has there been a conclusion?
I would refer to the letter, which is, I think, quite detailed and kind of goes through a fair amount of discussion about our proposed approach
to addressing the document. I do want to confirm, though, the document does exist, the FD 1023.
I really can't get into the specifics here. I will tell you that we understand completely the importance of congressional oversight. That's important to me. I also understand very much, as I think you do, the importance of us protecting sources and methods and ongoing investigations, and we're committed to try to work through the process.
I had a frustrating conversation last year with Attorney General Garland about something I'm still trying to understand here, and that's how the Biden administration can impartially investigate the Biden family. And so I want to come back to that with you, if I could, today to get at it a little bit deeper. My first question is whether you or anybody else at the FBI has communicated with White House employees or with Attorney General Garland or with DOJ staff regarding investigations that pertain to President Biden or to any member of his family.
Well, I certainly have not communicated with the White House about any investigation on that subject. My instructions to our...
And would that also include Attorney General Garland and the DOJ staff?
Well, I don't know that I can get into any discussions I had with Attorney General Garland. I talk to him, probably every day, one way or another, about all sorts of investigations, so that one's a little trickier. But what I will tell you is, as you know, I'm an FBI director appointed by the previous president, and our agents in our Baltimore field office are working with a U.S. attorney from the previous administration, that is the U.S. attorney in Delaware, on, I think, the investigation you're referring to. And my expectations of our agents on every investigation, which I communicate like a broken record, are that we are to follow the facts wherever they lead, to whomever they lead, no matter who likes it, no matter who it makes happy or unhappy.
So would that Delaware U.S. attorney be the person then responsible for deciding about unlawful evidence of unlawful conduct by the president and about what to do with that evidence?
Well, again, I don't want to engage in hypotheticals, but the Delaware U.S. attorney is leading, I think, the investigation that has been publicly disclosed that you're, I think, referring to.
Let me just come back to what I'm trying to understand then. If the FBI has uncovered evidence that alleges criminal conduct by the president.
Just tell them what. I'm sorry.
Sorry. And you then, I presume, hand this to the DOJ if you uncover this. But I understand the DOJ's policy is they're not going to charge a sitting president while that person is president. And the DOJ is not going to provide that information to Congress, not going to comply with subpoenas for documents. It feels to me like it's a dog chasing its tail. And the question is, if illegal conduct is alleged or uncovered, how does the Congress or the American public ever get that evidence?
Well, the decisions made by DOJ about how to staff prosecutions, which U.S. attorney's offices, which counsel to appoint, all those sorts of things are entrusted by regulation to the department, to the Attorney General. I can speak to what the FBI's role is and my expectations of FBI agents, and those are the ones I've communicated.
But to be clear, if evidence were uncovered by the FBI, you would hand that over to the DOJ. They then make the determination, whether it's the Attorney General or, in this case, the Delaware U.S. Attorney, what to do with that evidence. And again, their policy is not to charge a sitting president, and we can't get the evidence in Congress. Is that correct?
Decisions about who to charge, what to charge, those are decisions made by prosecutors at the Justice Department, including the U.S. Attorney in Delaware. And decisions about the Justice Department's communications about its decision-making are the Justice Department's decisions. I don't want to speak for them on that.
We're right back at where we started without being able to clarify how we have an impartial investigation here, and I appreciate the opportunity to get some oversight. It's just very frustrating when we can't. Thank you,
Thank you,
Director.
Senator Hagerty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few weeks ago, Special Counsel Durham confirmed the FBI had bias against President Trump and took unprecedented steps to go after him during the 2016 presidential election. The Durham report showed, 1, the FBI did not have an adequate basis to launch the investigation. 2, it didn't verify or examine all of the evidence. And 3, the FBI was politically charged against then-candidate Trump. This, of course, was before your time. But here we go again. In August of 22, the FBI raided the personal residence of President Trump. This unprecedented raid was a shocking escalation in what we talk about with the weaponization of the federal government against political opponents. You know, our country is almost 250 years old. We've had 46 presidents. This is unprecedented. When we say it's unprecedented, we mean it. This has never been seen before in our country's history. Just like we saw in the Durham report, the FBI did not follow traditional protocols, and this investigation was chock full of abnormalities. So I kind of want to go into those a little bit. Director Wray, as you know, the committee recently conducted a transcribed interview with Stephen D'Antuono, the former assistant director in charge of the FBI's Washington field office. He has over 20 years of FBI experience, and he expressed some strong concerns with your department's handling of the case, the DOJ's handling of the case. The first abnormality deals with the FBI office that they conducted the raid themselves. Director Wray, generally speaking, which FBI office oversees Palm Beach, Florida?
The Miami office has an office in Palm Beach, but to the question you're asking, it's not unusual for a field office that is investigating the case to send the case team down to be involved in conducting a search.
And President Trump's residence is in Palm Beach, Florida, is that correct?
Yes.
Director Wray, did the Miami field office conduct the investigation and search at Mar-a-Lago?
The Washington field office conducted the search, although I think there was some assistance by people from the Miami
But it was primarily run out of Washington and not the Miami field office.
which was the case team that had opened the investigation.
Did the FBI
based on a
headquarters-
referral from the National Archives, which is in D.C.
Did the FBI headquarters in Washington instruct the Washington field office to start that investigation and that raid at Mar-a-Lago?
Well, the investigation was opened in the field by the Washington field office.
Right. So it was not Miami, it was Washington.
And the Washington field office opened the investigation based on a referral from the National Archives, which is also in D.C., so that makes sense.
Who made the decision to have the Washington field office execute that search warrant rather than the Miami field office?
I can't speak to the specific individual. As you know, this is an ongoing case, and internal deliberations about
Well,
an ongoing case.
I'm not asking about the facts of the case. I'm asking about who made the call to go to Washington and use the Washington field office as opposed to Miami. Would that have been you?
Well, no, the Washington field office opened the investigation because they're the office where the National Archives is, which is what referred the investigation and kicked off the whole investigation.
Director, on May 15th, 2023, the FBI, your special counsel, or excuse me, not your special counsel, your general counsel sent a letter to Special Counsel Durham in response to his report. In that letter, the FBI wrote, quote, FBI executive management has instructed investigations to be run out of the field and not from headquarters. So despite the location of the search occurring in the territory of the FBI's field office, the Washington field office instructed the raid. This is inconsistent with the FBI statement from 2 months ago. I want to move on to a second abnormality.
I'm sorry,
real
it's
quick.
actually not.
I've got 1 minute left.
Inconsistent.
Well, I got 1 minute left, Director. Now, is it normal for a U.S. attorney to be assigned to an investigation, a high-profile investigation?
Well, that's a decision that's made over at the Justice Department as to how they allocate
But that's normal
responsibility.
protocol, is that correct?
I mean, there are investigations, prosecutions and cases that are handled by Main Justice. There are trial attorneys there, but again, I only speak to the FBI's decision-making, not to the Justice Department.
And a U.S. attorney was not initially assigned to this investigation, were they?
I think that's correct, but again, I would refer you to the Justice Department for any questions about U.S. attorneys versus Main Justice.
And the third abnormality that I find really troubling, probably the most troubling, quite frankly, is the FBI did not first seek consent to search the residence, did they?
Well, there is a very detailed filing in court that goes through in fairly excruciating detail the process that was followed that led up to the execution of the search. And it goes through in great detail the efforts that were made to secure documents. Because this case is now pending and moving forward in federal court, I want to respect that and not engage in more discussion beyond. But other to refer you to the filing, which lays out in great detail, I think, the answers to your questions.
Director, that the Durham report laid out very clearly that in cases, just in general, that you cross every T and dot every I. That was not done here. You didn't run it out of the field office. You didn't have a U.S. attorney assigned to the case. Senior officials did not listen to people on the ground, as the testimony of Mr. Dan Tuono talked about. You didn't ask for consent from their attorney. You didn't ask for a consent search, despite the president having cooperated and handed over documents for a long period of time. And you refused to wait for President Trump's own attorney to get to Mar-a-Lago to do this with you. And so what has changed since Durham? You've acknowledged this in 2023 that things should be run out of the field, that you've made internal process changes, but nothing has really changed since 2016, and that's my big concern. With that, I yield back.
I could not disagree more, but we'll just have to disagree on that one.
Well, here's what he said.
Mr. Chairman, Director Wray, FBI's mission is to protect the American people and uphold the U.S. Constitution, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So we had a couple years ago, it was a hearing, and I actually, looking on all of the concerns that I've seen, was really warrantless surveillance and abuses of Section 702 of FISA. I compare your agency to KGB, and spending 2 years in this committee, reading a lot of reports now, doing a lot of hearings, I am really shocked that your agency is involved not just unlawful surveillance of American citizens, intimidation of American citizens, censorship of American citizens, potential cover-ups of convenient political figures, and potential setups of inconvenient political figures. And a lot of my colleagues asked a lot of questions, but I think when we look at that, and unfortunately we haven't been doing our job authorizing spending, which was not authorized by our committee already for over a decade, we're going to have this serious conversation and including reauthorization of Section 702. But I want to talk about, follow up on some other issues that you mentioned about that my colleagues I was talking about, and you mentioned that you focus on malign foreign actors. So in Durham report, which describes 2020, he states, and this is a quote, "Steele subsources could have been compromised by the Russians. FBI never gave appropriate consideration to the possibility that the Steele reports was Russian disinformation. No vetting happened. You have some falsified FISA court application. You have some very shady, confidential human sources that you kept paying for them. Nothing was vetted. Some of your head of counterintelligence division was accused of taking money from Russian oligarchs just recently this year. So you said all was bad. Now we go to 2022. Your agency is involved with SBU, Security Service of Ukraine, to actually provide information to big tech to censor just views of American people. No vetting seems as happening. This is information, actually a lot of this information was pro-Russian against Ukraine and pro-Putin. Your agents just pass it along. It seems like nothing happened. And it's interesting for me that, when I raised some issue, actually beginning of July, and what's happening in Ukraine, I don't have any confidential human sources, just using common sense and intelligence that something is wrong happening in Ukraine. It seems like there is a lot of infiltration. I was attacked. Oh my gosh, how can you question? Well, strangely enough, after me raising this question in the middle of July, President Zelensky fired his SBU top guy, opens over 600 investigations, is potential, infiltration by Russians, and then fire a lot of other people for corruption, and anti-corruption prosecutor was suddenly installed. But what is really interesting for me, how could you have these processes, and are you doing actually any investigation to look? Because it seems to me, as I understand, you still have our agencies working with SBU, with, coming from KGB time and FSB time has a lot of potential to have this infiltration. Are you doing any investigations on these issues?
Doing investigations on...
Yeah, to look at that, why we're doing unvetted information we're taking from SBU, which actually was infiltrated and given to censor Americans to our big tech companies. Are you looking into that as an agency?
I'm not sure there's an investigation that is directly on point to what you're saying. I mean, certainly the SBU is an agency that we
So we're not doing
worked with for a long time.
So did we change the processes now, since we know your guys work with SBU, SBU was infiltrated by Russian, and big tech was censoring American citizens with this unvetted information that actually was provided by Russians. Do you change any processes? Or is it still happening? You have still the same processes that happen. Is it still happening now?
Well, the engagement that we had with SBU was during the...
But I'm talking right now.
Yeah.
Because recently, some of your agents had actually a joint meeting, and they were bragging how they're top corporations with SBU. Did you change processes?
I'm not sure what processes you're talking
To
about.
vet information.
Yeah.
What's happening?
Again, during the period at the beginning of the invasion...
No, I'm talking right now.
Yeah.
Do you vet information that you get from agencies like SBU? I mean, I don't know if are we being stupid? I understand. Are we being infiltrated by Russians or corrupt? I don't understand why we're not vet information with such a really challenging agency. So are you changing anything of that? I would like to have a briefing or something on this, because if you're not looking at that, I have a huge problem with that.
I'm happy to try to see if we can arrange to get you a better briefing on the subject.
Because this is a serious national security issue. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from South Carolina. Oh, unanimous consent. I'm sorry. Gentlelady from Texas is recognized.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Chairman. The lone ranger on this side.
Thanks for sticking with us.
We appreciate you for a moment, and all of my members. Let me just quickly indicate that I have a document that is a tweet that is wanting to submit into the record. Two of the Republican witnesses were gifted 255,000 checks, 255,000 in checks immediately after they testified before this committee. It seems to be quid pro quo, but the fact of the tweet that I'm submitting from Mr. Kyle Serapin says the fact that Mr. Allen has not yet cashed the check is not that he did not receive the check. So I submit in the record the tweet from Mr. Serapin, who indicated that two gentlemen, Garrett and Marcus, were receiving a check of
Continuing your attack on whistleblowers without objection. Those are
just a clarification, Mr. Chairman, and then finally, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Department of Homeland Security, Strategic Intelligence Assessment and Data on Domestic Terrorism, dated October 2022, Appendix A, the document itself, Appendix A, Appendix B, and the categories of domestic violent extremism.
Without objection.
Your kindness is appreciated. Thank you very much.
The gentleman from South Carolina is recognized.
How many illegal FISA queries have occurred under your leadership of the FBI?
Well, there are reports that have come out with different numbers about compliance incidents.
More than 1 million illegal ones? Because that's what the Inspector General said. The Inspector General said that in the 3.4 million of these queries, more than 1 million were in error. Do you have any basis to disagree with that assessment by the Inspector General?
I'm not sure actually that's a correct characterization of the Inspector General's findings on that.
Well, the internet will remind you of that in moments. But let's now go to what the court said. The court said it was over 200,000 that have occurred on your watch. Do you have any basis to disagree with that assessment?
Again, I don't have the number as I sit here right now. What I can
Seems
tell
like
you,
a number you should know. How many times the FBI is breaking the law under your watch, especially if it's like over 1 million, to not know that number? And I'm worried about your veracity on the subject as well. Play the video.
letters for
you going to the
investigation
FISA
of
court?
the Capitol.
Or you
I don't
going-
believe FISA is remotely implicated in our investigation.
So there, Senator Lee's asking you whether or not FISA was in any way involved in your January 6th investigation, and you say no. Was that truthful?
I said that I did not believe it was.
Okay, so now let's pull up what the court said, which was something a little different than what you said. So here, nope, that's not the right one. Yeah, here we go. Right there, it says, the government has reported additional significant violations of the querying standard, including several relating to the January 6, 2021 breach of the Capitol. So I guess the question, Director Wray, is did you not know when you were answering these questions that the FBI was engaging in these illegal searches, or did you perjure yourself to Senator Lee?
I certainly didn't perjure myself. At the time that I testified in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee, I didn't have that piece of information. I will add...
Well, that was a court order. You didn't have that piece of information because the court hadn't yet rendered a judgment. Did you not know when you gave the untruthful answer before Senator Lee that this was going on?
It was a truthful answer. I did not believe FISA had been involved in the January 6th
But it was.
investigation.
So you didn't... The answer is the FBI has broken so bad that people can go and engage in queries that when you come before the Congress to answer questions, you're like blissfully ignorant. You're blissfully ignorant as to the unlawful queries. You're blissfully ignorant as to the Biden shakedown regime. And it just seems like it gets into a kind of a creepy place as well. Go to our next.
It was recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Director Wray, thank you for being here. You know, believe it or not, I'm basically just a simple country dentist, but I do know my dentistry. And one thing I know about are abscesses. If you have an abscess, you can have a mild or moderate one, and you treat it with antibiotics and warm salt rinses, and in a week to 10 days, it'll be better. If you have a severe one, you've got to take a scalpel to that abscess. You've got to cut it open, and you've got to let the pus and the blood and the gas drain out. If you don't, that abscess will travel. It'll travel to the patient's brain possibly, or to their heart, and it definitely can kill them. That's the type of infection that I feel is within the FBI today. It has gotten so deep that we need to get in there with a metaphorical scalpel before it kills our nation. We need real structural change, and this committee is that metaphorical scalpel. A clear sign of the rot is a memo where your agents, and I know you say you feel bad about this too, but nevertheless, and I don't think you like to talk about it, but your agents in the field office attempted to spy on Catholic churches and their congregations and frame them as extremists. This is unbelievable. How do we get there? Who exactly are the Catholics you're going to go after here, or they were going to go after? The charitable men of the Knights of Columbus that help their communities, that help charities, that help people in every way they can? Or maybe we meant the folks that are fighting for the sanctity of life? Or are you talking about those who hold true to their beliefs rooted in the traditional values and teachings of the Catholic faith? As a Roman Catholic myself, and I believe you are as well, I was deeply, deeply disturbed by this memo. And it's shameful. It was only rescinded after basically it got leaked to the public. That should scare each and every American, from parents at school board meetings to grandmas clutching their rosary beads. The misguided priorities of our intelligence community put every American at risk, and it is wrong. It is un-American, and it undermines two of our most important tenets: freedom of speech and freedom of religion. It's what our nation is built upon. Director Wray, you work for the American people. They pay your salary. They pay all of our salaries. They don't work for us. You work for them. You are supposed to protect them from the bad guys. And now many feel that they need protection from the FBI. I have a few questions here. Despite multiple requests, why hasn't the FBI produced an unredacted copy of this memo that really outlines this? It isn't public security, it isn't national security, it isn't public safety. This is an internal thing that you all did that was wrong, and we as a committee, this committee, have the right to look at it. When are we going to get it? Why haven't we gotten it already? Unredacted.
We redact information for a variety of reasons that cover various rules that apply to us.
So I
our
want to know
ability
why
to
this one.
transparent. So-
I don't know about the rules. All I know, I told you, man, I'm not a lawyer, all right? But you know what I want to know? I want to know why we don't know what happened here. That people in their churches had to worry, and it isn't something that's going to affect national security. So whatever damn rule it is you have, we should change that rule. Because when something like this happens, and it isn't a matter of national security, then we should know. So I'd like to know when we're going to get it. I'd like a date certain.
What I can tell you is that we are almost done with our internal review, and as I said to the chairman, we're going to be providing a briefing to the committee on what the internal review found.
When?
It should be later this summer.
And why do we need your internal review? Good you're doing an internal review. You should do a lot internally. But why don't we get the information when we ask for it, when we subpoena for it? We clearly are not creating any risk to our nation or national security. You could give us that tomorrow. Why don't we get that part tomorrow, and then you can give us the briefing and the internal review?
As I said, we're going to give you a briefing on the internal review, and then we can discuss additional information that may.
Because you're going to try to shape it differently and make it out that it was kind of okay.
No, on that, no. I will tell you that I am not going to defend or excuse that memo or that product.
I understand you said that. I have simple yes or no. These are real easy questions. Has the FBI created or maintained any list of Roman Catholic churches? Yes or no?
Any list of Roman Catholic
Churches, correct.
Well, we're certainly not targeting any Roman Catholic churches.
Well, they
That I can
were.
assure
They
you.
were. The field office was until
no,
we
that's-
found out. But do you, as a yes or no, do you have a list? If you don't have a list, it's easy to say no.
Well, we have 38,000 employees. We engage with churches of all kinds.
So
to
you may
help
have a
them.
list of churches that you're looking at for
No,
possible
no,
crimes.
not for possible investigation.
How about Russian Orthodox churches?
Same answer.
Greek Orthodox churches? Tell me, yes
Again,
or no? Evangelical churches? Tell me
we
yes
do
or
not,
no.
We do not maintain.
Yes or
list-
no?
Excuse me?
Please answer yes or no.
It's not a yes or no question.
It is a yes or no. If you've got a list of churches that you're targeting and looking at, the answer is yes. If you don't, the answer is no.
If your question is, do we have a list of churches that we are targeting, then the answer is no, we do not have.
How about Jewish synagogues? Yes or no? Same question.
We do not maintain any kind of list of religious institutions that we're targeting because we are not targeting religious institutions.
Let me tell you, it's a sorry state of affairs that these questions are questions I have to ask, and it's a damn shame to see what's become of our once universally respected FBI. We need structural change, and Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Director, the 5 individuals who signed off on that memo, have any of them?
The American people need to understand what just happened. My Democrat colleague just asked the director of the FBI whether or not they are buying information about our fellow Americans, and the answer is, well, we'll just have to get back to you on that. It sounds really complicated, but I have other questions. I'm sitting here with my father. I will make certain that between the man sitting next to me and every person he knows and my ability to forever hold a grudge, that you will regret not following my direction. I am sitting here waiting for the call with my father. Sounds like a shakedown, doesn't it, Director?
I'm not going to get into commenting on that.
You seem deeply uncurious about it, don't you? Almost suspiciously uncurious. Are you protecting the Bidens?
Absolutely not. The FBI
Well, you
does
won't
not
answer
and
the
has
question.
no
Hold on.
interest in
You won't answer the
protecting
question
anyone
about whether or not
politically.
that's a shakedown, and everybody knows why you won't answer it. Because to the millions of people who will see this, they know it is. And your inability to acknowledge that is deeply revealing about you. But let's go from the uncurious to the downright nosy. How many illegal FISA queries have occurred under your leadership of the FBI?
Well, there are reports that have come out with different numbers about compliance incidents.
More than 1 million illegal ones? Because that's what the Inspector General said. The Inspector General said that in the 3.4 million of these queries, more than 1 million were in error. Do you have any basis to disagree with that assessment by the Inspector General?
I'm not sure actually that's a correct characterization of the Inspector General's findings on that.
The internet will remind you of
But
that in moments. But let's now go to what the court said. The court said it was over 200,000 that have occurred on your watch. Do you have any basis to disagree with that assessment?
Again, I don't have the number as I sit here right now. What I can
Seems
tell
like
you,
a number you should know. How many times the FBI is breaking the law under your watch, especially if it's like over 1 million, to not know that number? And I'm worried about your veracity on the subject as well. Play the video.
letters for
You going to the
investigation
FISA
of
court?
the Capitol.
Or you
I don't
going-
believe FISA is remotely implicated in our investigation.
So there, Senator Lee's asking you whether or not FISA was in any way involved in your January 6th investigation, and you say no. Was that truthful?
I said that I did not believe it was.
Okay, so now let's pull up what the court said, which was something a little different than what you said. So here, nope, that's not the right one. Yeah, here we go. Right there, it says, the government has reported additional significant violations of the querying standard, including several relating to the January 6, 2021 breach of the Capitol. So I guess the question, Director Wray, is did you not know when you were answering these questions that the FBI was engaging in these illegal searches, or did you perjure yourself to Senator Lee?
I certainly didn't perjure myself. At the time that I testified in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee, I didn't have that piece of information. I will add...
Well, that was a court order. You didn't have that piece of information because the court hadn't yet rendered a judgment. Did you not know when you gave the untruthful answer before Senator Lee that this was going on?
It was a truthful answer. I did not believe FISA had been involved in the January 6th
But it was.
investigation.
So you didn't, the answer is the FBI has broken so bad that people can go and engage in queries that when you come before the Congress to answer questions, you're like blissfully ignorant. You're blissfully ignorant as to the unlawful queries. You're blissfully ignorant as to the Biden shakedown regime. And it just seems like it gets into a kind of a creepy place as well. Go to our next image on what the court said. Like, just so the American people realize, the court has smacked you down, ruling FBI personnel apparently conducted queries for improper personal reasons. People were looking themselves up, they were looking their ex-lovers up. Who has been held accountable or fired as a consequence of the FBI using the FISA process as their like creepy personal snoop machine?
There have been instances in which individuals have had disciplinary action and who
Name
are no
them.
longer with it. I can't get into it here, but we can follow back up
But
with
don't you
that.
see that that's kind of the thing, Director Wray, that you preside over the FBI that has the lowest level of trust in the FBI's history. People trusted the FBI more when J. Edgar Hoover was running the place than when you are. And the reason is because you don't give straight answers. You give answers that later a court deems aren't true. And then at the end of the day, you won't criticize an obvious shakedown when it's directly in front of us. And it appears as though you're whitewashing the conduct of corrupt people.
Respectfully, Congressman, in your home state of Florida, the number of people applying to come work for us and devote their lives working for us is up over 100%.
We're deeply proud of them, and they deserve better than you.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from Tennessee is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Wray, this is no time to mince words. The American people have lost faith in the FBI. All of our constituents are demanding that we get this situation under control, and we have to do that. That's our responsibility. This is not a political party issue, sir. This is about whether the very system of justice in our country can be trusted anymore. Without that, no republic can survive. See, the American people that we represent are losing count of the scandals that are mounting. The FBI has been involved. They've seen evidence that it's being used as a political tool of the Biden administration. They've seen counterterrorism resources being used against school parents, the homes of conservative political opponents being raided. They've seen conservative states being targeted over their election integrity laws, and conservative Catholics and pro-life citizens characterized as violent extremists. Just last month, as you know, former Special Counsel John Durham sat right in that seat and testified that the Justice Department and the FBI should never have launched the bogus Trump-Russia investigation. And his lengthy report reluctantly concluded that the FBI, quote, failed to uphold its mission of strict fidelity to the law. Just last week, NBC had a poll. Only 37% of registered voters now view the FBI positively. 35% have a negative view. In 2018, by comparison, 52% of the country had a positive view of the FBI. There's a serious decline in the people's faith, and it's on your watch, sir. And then, July 4th, we had this explosive 155-page opinion from a federal court in my home state of Louisiana. It explains in detail that the FBI has been directly involved in what the court says is, quote, arguably the most massive attack against free speech in United States history. The court ordered the White House, DOJ, and FBI, among others, to immediately cease colluding with and coercing social media companies to suppress American speech, of course, conservative speech in particular. Director Wray, I find it stunning. You made no mention of this court opinion either in your opening statement today or in this lengthy 14-page report that you prepared on July 12th, which is 8 days after the court ruling. Have you read the ruling, sir?
I am familiar with the ruling, and I've reviewed it with our Office of General Counsel.
Are you deeply disturbed by what they've told you about the ruling if you haven't read it yourself?
Obviously, we're going to comply with the court's order, the court's preliminary injunction. We sent out guidance to the field and the headquarters about how to do that. Needless to say, the injunction itself is a subject of ongoing litigation, and so I'll decline to comment further on.
Well, let me tell you what the court concluded, because it should be the first thing you think about every morning and the last thing you think about at night. They said that, quote, the court found, apparently the FBI engaged in a massive effort to suppress disfavored conservative speech and blatantly ignored the First Amendment's right to free speech. The evidence shows the FBI threatened adverse consequences to social media companies that they did not comply with its censorship request. The court found that, quote, this seemingly unrelenting pressure by the FBI and the other defendants had the intended result of suppressing millions of protected free speech postings by American citizens. As a result, the court states, for example, millions of citizens did not hear about the Hunter Biden laptop story prior to the November 3rd, 2020 election. Page 4 of the court ruling lists some of the important subjects that the Biden administration and the FBI forced the social media platforms to suppress. The evidence shows you, your agency, the people that directly report to you, suppressed conservative-leaning free speech about topics like the laptop, the lab leak theory of COVID-19's origin, the effectiveness of masks and COVID-19 lockdowns and vaccines, speech about election integrity in the 2020 presidential election, security of voting by mail, even parody about the president himself, negative posts about the economy. The FBI made the social media platforms pull that information off the internet if it came from conservative sources. They did this under the guise that it was disinformation. Can you define what disinformation is?
What I can tell you is that our focus is not on disinformation, broadly speaking.
Well, wait a minute. Yes, it is. Wait a minute.
Can I answer the question?
You can in a minute. Your star witness said in the litigation, Elvis Chan, who's in charge of this, said they do it on the basis of disinformation. We need a definition of what that is.
Our focus is on malign foreign disinformation, that is foreign hostile actors who engage in covert efforts to abuse our social media platforms, which is something that is not seriously in dispute.
I have to stop you for time. That's not accurate. You need to read this court opinion because you're in charge of enforcing it. The court has found that, and Elvis Chan testified under oath in charge of this for you. He said 50%. He had a 50% success rate in having alleged election disinformation taken down or censored. That wasn't just foreign adversaries, sir. That was American citizens. How do you answer for that?
Well, first off, I'm not sure that's a correct characterization.
Comes right out of the opinion. You should read it.
Of his testimony. But what I would say is the FBI is not in the business of moderating content or causing any social media company to suppress or censor.
That is not what the court has found.
What I would also say is among the things that you listed off, I find ironic the reference to the lab leak theory. The idea that the FBI would somehow be involved in suppressing references to the lab leak theory is somewhat absurd when you consider the fact that the FBI was the only agency in the entire intelligence community to reach the assessment that it was more likely than not that that was the explanation for the pandemic.
Your agents pulled it off the internet, sir. That's what the evidence in the court has found.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
A recent poll found that 37% of Americans have a positive view of the FBI. And that's from an NBC poll. I wouldn't exactly call that right media propaganda, and I think I know why. Here's what the American people know and believe about the FBI today, sir. If you are a Trump, you'll be prosecuted. If you are a Biden, you'll be protected. And the American people that I represent are sick and tired of this double standard. It seems like every single hearing that we have in this room, we talk about the two-tiered justice system of Biden's DOJ and the FBI, and as we were talking earlier, here we are again. President Trump endured an unprecedented raid at his home in Mar-a-Lago. President Biden's home, however, was respectfully browsed. President Trump is facing up to 400 years in federal prison for allegedly being in possession of classified documents he obtained as the commander-in-chief of these United States of America. And meanwhile, President Biden is facing no charges for the classified documents he had held at his time as a senator and a vice president, not the president of these United States of America. And last I checked, he had no legal authority to declassify those documents. Assuming President Trump was in possession of said classified documents, would those documents be more secure, surrounded by Secret Service at Mar-a-Lago, or in a box, in a garage, behind your Corvette? You know the answer to that question. Question for you, sir. What can you tell us about the status of the FBI's investigation of President Biden's classified documents found next to his Corvette in Delaware and those found at the Penn Biden Center? Do we have an update on that, sir?
What I can tell you is that there is an ongoing special counsel investigation led by Mr. Robert Hur, and we have FBI agents affiliated with it, working on it, working very actively and aggressively with him on that case. I obviously disagree with your description of the two standards. In my view, at least under my watch, we have one standard.
Okay.
And that is we're going to pursue the facts wherever they lead, no matter who likes it. And I add that last part because especially in sensitive investigations, almost by definition, somebody's not going to like it.
So I understand, and that's actually why I led with the sentiment of the American people. I understand that's your sentiment.
So
I do want to finish this. So I want everybody to talk about this dichotomy that we have seen. I get your point, sir, but that's just not what we see as the public, as we the people. We see one case being fast-tracked and one case being slow-walked. We see one president's home being raided, the other president's home being kindly searched. You have one government agency, the Secret Service, protecting the former president and his home, and another government agency, the FBI, raiding the same home. Now, to me, sir, that's tragically ironic. And we expect more from a functional constitutional republic, and these things shouldn't be happening. Now, it's my opinion that Joe Biden is the most unpopular president we have seen in a century, and that's why he knows the only way to stop President Trump from beating him in November is by putting him in jail. You talked about this, Mr. Fry. In the 247 years of this existence of this great nation, only one president has ever been indicted by the DOJ and has home raided by the FBI. Now, some have said that President Trump's indictment means that no one is above the law. Okay, all right, I would love to see that. But what about Hillary Clinton? And what about Joe Biden? And what about Hunter Biden, who is America's favorite son? And let me tell you something, I got a 4-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old daughter at my house. Hunter Biden to me is like glitter. He is on everything and you cannot get rid of him. And yet nothing is going to be done about this. We're sick of it. James Comey decided not to prosecute Hillary Clinton despite overwhelming evidence that she committed crimes. And as I recall, it was the position of the FBI to not prosecute because they didn't want to interfere with the presidential election. What do you call this? The Iowa caucuses are in 6 months. 6 months. I think the American public would expect to see this from Cuba and from Venezuela and from Russia and from China, but not here. The people expect us to have blind justice. They expect equal justice under the law. It is not the job of the DOJ or the FBI to prosecute Joe Biden's top political opponent who is leading in every single primary poll, and the Iowa caucuses are in 6 months. Let the people decide. It's our job to uphold the Constitution. As a West Point grad and military veteran, this is the Constitution I give my life to protect, and I expect us all to uphold it likewise. Thank you so much for being here.
Mr. Chairman, may I briefly respond?
Sure.
So number one, as to the investigations related to Mrs. Clinton, as you noted, that happened under my predecessor, and I'm not going to attempt to speak for or defend that decision.
I recognize that.
Second, as to your descriptions of the investigations related to Hunter Biden, As you know, there is an ongoing investigation being led by the Delaware U.S. Attorney appointed by President Trump, and we are actively working on that investigation with him.
We look forward to seeing the results of this quickly and swiftly.
And third and finally, to your point about the American people and their views, I worry less about NBC polls or polls by any other news outlet, but I will tell you that the number of people in Texas applying to work for us since I've been in this job has gone up 93%, and in fact,
I'm not going to quote Matt Gaetz. I heard his response to this earlier.
in fact, we have
That's great,
more applicants from the state of Texas annually in the last several years than any other state in the country.
And that makes sense because Texas is the greatest state in the country.
Then I think that speaks very well of the view of Texans about the FBI.
Director, any agents who served on the Crossfire Hurricane investigation or the Mueller investigation, are any of those agents on Mr. Hur or Mr. Smith's special counsel team?
I don't believe so, but I can't, on the top of my head, go through the list of, there's a lot of agents involved in the two investigations, and so let me check into that and see if there's any way we can get back to you on that, because I don't want to get out over my skis.
Thank you. Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
I don't believe anybody has lost a security clearance, but again, we have an internal review pending, and that I'll let that come to its conclusion.
How did you become aware of the Catholic memo that the gentleman just referenced?
How did I become aware of it?
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman may state his point of order.
Whose time is the chairman consuming with
I thought for the committee, it's not a point of order. The chair now recognizes the gentleman for Texas for 5 minutes.
Thank you, sir. I will say this, Mr. Wray, I'm one of those sheriffs that will be very blunt with you today. That's right here. I've had an opportunity to look at your testimony, lots of stuff, and hear about numerous task forces, crimes being committed against children, including even infants and toddlers, MS-13 gang members coming across the open southern border, the poisoning and killing of the American people with fentanyl, the sex trafficking, the human trafficking. It's quite clear, it is clear that you guys are dealing with some of the sickest bastards in our society. I have an article here from CNN in January 2022 calling the January 6th investigation the biggest investigation in FBI history. And what shocks me about this, quite honestly, is that you don't mention January 6th, again, the biggest investigation, not one time in your 14-page testimony. You don't mention it one time. And that makes me ask myself the question, what the hell are you hiding? Sir, you mentioned 38,000 agents and support personnel in your agency. How many FBI agents and support personnel have you assigned to the January 6th investigation?
I don't know that I know the number. I know we have a lot of people working on it in multiple field
Fair
offices.
enough, lots.
Yeah.
Knowing that you are dealing with some of the sickest people in our society with investigations related to child sex trafficking, have you reassigned any of these agents or personnel to investigate January 6th? Yes or no?
I don't believe we have reassigned people away from child exploitation to January 6th.
Now, let me just say this, Director. I find that answer disturbing because last month, Steve Friend, he testified before the Weaponization Committee. Mr. Friend was a domestic terrorism investigator for you, and he was told by one of his superiors that January 6th was, I quote, a higher priority than pursuing child pornography cases, end quote. And for those of you watching in America, understand today's FBI is more concerned about searching for and arresting Grandma and Grandpa for entering the Capitol building that day than pursuing the sick individuals in our society who prey on our children. And Mr. Wray, your priorities are flawed. But let's rehash what we know so far, all right? It's the largest investigation in FBI history, and you don't mention it in your testimony. Agents have been reassigned from child exploitation cases and so on. So now let's get into the money, Mr. Wray. How much taxpayer money has been spent on January 6th?
I don't know that I have the figure
You don't have
in
it?
my
Okay,
head,
fine.
but
Mr. Wray, I got an article here, December 22, 2022, 2 years after the events of January 6th, and it says the Justice Department has requested another $34 million from Congress. And number one, you shouldn't get another dime. The FBI shouldn't get another dime for this political witch hunt against the greatest president in my lifetime, Donald J. Trump. I want to turn my attention now to this fella, this character, Mr. Ray Epps. We've all heard of him. We've heard of Mr. Ray Epps. He was number 16 on your FBI most wanted list. He was encouraging people the night prior and the day of to go into the Capitol. And Mr. Ray Epps can be seen at the first breach of Capitol grounds at approximately 12:50 p.m. Play the clip, please.
We need to go into the Capitol.
Into the Capitol.
Into the Capitol. What? We are going to the Capitol, where our problems are. It's that direction. Please spread the word. All right, noted. Okay, but one more thing.
Yeah, so can we go up there? No?
When we go in,
are we going to get arrested if we go up there?
Yeah. You don't need to get shot.
Arrest us.
There he is, breaching the line, going in at the first breach into the Capitol grounds, the restricted area. Mr. Ray, you have arrested hundreds of people related to January 6th. And there have been people arrested for breaching Capitol grounds. Cooey Griffin is an example. Rachel Genko is an example. And then we go to Mr. Brandon Strecka. Brandon was arrested for disorderly and disruptive conduct, which included yelling, I quote, "Go, go, go," as rioters tried to enter the Capitol. These three never went into the Capitol. They never assaulted anyone. So let's be honest with each other. There is very little difference between the actions of Ray Epps and Brandon Strecka that day, but yet Strecka was arrested and Epps wasn't. Epps also testified to the January 6th committee. He was back at his hotel when video evidence showed that he wasn't. He lied. He was on the Capitol grounds just as Brandon Strecka was. Epps even texted his nephew at 2:12 p.m. and said, I quote, "I was in the front with a few others." It was on the video. "I also orchestrated it." Now look into the camera, sir, when you answer my next question. Are you going to arrest Mr. Epps, yes or no?
I'm not going to engage here in a discussion about individual people who are or are not going to be prosecuted.
Can I get a commitment? You just watched the video. I'm an old law dog. I understand a little bit about probable cause. He did very little. There was very little difference what he did and Mr. Strecka. You can see him. He's encouraging, I almost think he's inciting a riot. He's encouraging people the night prior to go into the Capitol. The day of, go into the Capitol. And he was at the first breach. And he breached the restricted area. Everybody, a lot of people getting arrested for not going into the Capitol, but they're in the restricted area. But yet, Ray Epps, who many people feel, fed, right? And there's a lot of clout over this. So my point is this. You arrested a lot of folks for unlawful activity. You just saw the video. And I will tell you, Mr. Ray, if you don't arrest Mr. Epps, there's a reason behind it. I believe you know what it is. And it appears to me you are protecting this guy. I strongly recommend you get your house back in order. With that, I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, if I might briefly.
Gentlemen, will respond, then we got a couple point of orders.
It is
not
never,
unanimous consent, excuse me. Go ahead.
It has never been appropriate for an FBI director in congressional testimony to be weighing in on who is or isn't going to be arrested and who is or isn't going to get charged, which is a prosecutor's decision. If you are suggesting that the violence that at the Capitol on January 6th was part of some operation orchestrated by FBI sources or FBI agents, the answer is no, it was not. And to suggest otherwise is a disservice to our hardworking, dedicated law enforcement professionals.
Can I respond to that now that, the point is, he was number 16 on your list.
Yeah,
he was 16 on your list. You never arrested him. But hundreds of Americans were arrested. Shame on you.
The chair recognizes the Director Wray. Did the FBI ask financial institutions to turn over their customers? You yield the time to me. Did the FBI ask financial institutions to turn over their customers' debit and credit card purchase history in the Washington, D.C. area for January 5th and 6th, 2021?
I don't know the answer to that as I sit here right now.
Well, we do, because Bank of America gave it this email from the FBI to Bank of America.
Well, I am aware that Bank of America provided information to the FBI, but what communications occurred between the FBI and Bank of America about it?
Let's read it. To recap our morning call, we are prepared to action the following threshold. Customers transacting debit card, credit card, Washington, D.C. purchases between 1/5/21, 1/6/21. That's scary enough. But then the next bullet point's even more scary. Any historical, capital letters, all capitals, any historical purchase of a firearm. You guys asked financial institutions, at least Bank of America, we think more. Did you guys ask them?
Again, I don't have the full sequence of the back and forth. You've got one, looks like you've got one email that I haven't seen before here. So I don't know that I have the full exchange that this
Well, does this email
part of.
trouble you as much as it does members of the Judiciary Committee? That the FBI is asking for every single, I mean, we had members of Congress here that week, first time they're getting sworn in as a new member of Congress, their family in town, and you're sweeping, and they may happen to be a customer of Bank of America, and you're sweeping up every debit and credit card purchase of their family who were in town that week because their husband or their dad or their mom is getting sworn in as a new member of Congress? And then you're also saying, overlaying that information with, did this person buy a firearm?
And the question is?
I'm just nervous about that. Are you nervous about that?
As I think I've testified before, my understanding is that our engagement with Bank of America was fully lawful, but that we recalled the leads that were cut to field
Well, if it's lawful, that was my next point. If it's lawful, why did you say we're not going to use these leads? That's what Mr. Jensen testified to when we deposed him, the director of the terrorism unit at the FBI. That's what he testified to. Why did you not use the leads if it was lawful to get the information?
Well, there are
Chairman, it's 1 minute and 18 seconds overtime.
Sir, there are plenty of times where there are things that we lawfully can do, but that we decide is better that we not do. And I think that's what happened.
The idea that Mr. Massey said earlier, the idea that this is lawful, that you can ask this is scary. This is something else we're going to have to change. With that, I would yield to the gentlelady recognize the gentlelady from, well, we got a unanimous consent request from Mr. Moore.
Mr. Chairman, yes, the Wall Street Journal article I'd like to enter into the record says Republicans eye sweet home for new FBI headquarters in Alabama.
All right, without objection, the chair now recognizes the gentlelady for Texas for 5 minutes, and then we'll take a break, Director.
Who is Matthew Graves? Who is Matthew Graves?
I believe Matthew Graves, at least the person I'm thinking of is, I think, the U.S. Attorney in the District of Columbia.
That's the person I'm thinking of, too. Are you aware that he has promised more than 1,000 more individuals will be charged or indicted related to January 6th?
I had not heard that he had said that.
Well, it seems arbitrary, and there's reports that it's kind of a quasi-quota system that he's put together for January 6 prosecutions. Do you approve of targets, goals, quotas in prosecuting alleged criminal conduct?
Well, certainly not quotas. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, goals is a little bit more of an ambiguous term, but
certainly not quotas.
Certainly not quotas.
Do you know if any of your personnel at the FBI is involved in the investigations promised that will lead to indictments by the January 6th quota established by U.S. Attorney Graves?
That doesn't sound familiar to me.
Okay. In June 2021, you told this committee that a small group of people at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th had, quote, all sorts of weapons. Do you remember being here for that committee hearing and testifying that way?
In general, yes.
It has been reported that more than 40 FBI personnel, agents, or contractors were in the crowd on January 6th. Is that number accurate?
I don't know if that number is accurate.
Former Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sun reportedly has asserted that the protest crowd was filled with federal agents. Are you aware of his assertion?
I am not.
Would you agree with him that it was filled with federal agents on January 6th?
I would really have to see more closely exactly what he said and get the full context to be able to evaluate it.
How many agents were actually, agents or human resources were present at the Capitol complex and vicinity on January 6th?
Well, again, it's going to get confusing because it depends on when we deployed and responded to the breach that occurred. Obviously,
how many were under
federal agents?
Sure. Yeah, you're talking, and you and I both know what we're talking different things here. And please don't distract here because we're focusing on those who were there in an undercover capacity on January 6th. How many were there?
Again, I'm not sure that I can give you that number as I sit here. I'm not sure there were undercover agents on scene.
I find that kind of a remarkable statement, Director. At this point, you don't know whether there were undercover federal agents, FBI agents, in the crowd or in the Capitol on January 6th.
I say that because I want to be very careful. There have been a number of court filings related to some of these topics, and I want to make sure that I stick within what's in.
I understand that, but I thought I heard you say you didn't know whether there were FBI agents or informants or human sources in the Capitol or in the vicinity on January 6th. Did I misunderstand you? I thought that's what you said.
Well, I referred very specifically to undercover agents.
Yeah. And so are you acknowledging then there were undercover agents?
As I sit here right now, I do not believe there were undercover agents on scene.
Any
FBI agents.
Did you have any assets present that day in the crowd?
When it comes to what you're calling assets, or what we would call confidential human sources, that's a place where, again, I want to be careful, much as I said in response to an earlier question. There are court filings that I think speak to this that I'm happy to make sure we get to you, assuming they're not under seal. And that can better answer the question than I can as I sit here right now.
In the same June 2021 committee hearing, you told us that the FISA court, quote, approved FBI procedures, minimization procedures, collection and procedures, querying procedures, did not find misconduct, close quote. That's what you said. Specifically, you said the FISC found no misconduct. Yet 3 months later, the Inspector General found widespread problems in FBI's FISA applications, raising serious questions about the FBI review process of applications, including hundreds of examples of noncompliance with Woods procedures, for example. And we know that from December 2020 to November 2021, the FBI conducted 3.4 million warrantless searches of U.S. data under FISA. 3.4 million. Up nearly triple the amount of the previous year, and it got worse as you were telling us there was nothing to worry about. But now your reforms have produced about reduced it down to 119,000, over 200,000 total, but 119,000 discrete Americans. That just doesn't seem like you've accomplished much there if you have 119,000 illegal searches and queries under FISA. I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The House Judicial...
Chair now recognizes himself for an opening statement. 8 days ago on July 4th, in the Western District of Louisiana, the court found that the federal government suppressed Americans' First Amendment free speech rights. In his conclusion on page 154, the court said this, the judge said this: plaintiffs are likely to succeed on the merits in establishing that the government has used its power to silence the opposition. Opposition to COVID-19 vaccines, opposition to COVID-19 mask and lockdowns, opposition to the lab leak theory of COVID-19, opposition to the validity of the 2020 election, opposition to President Biden's policies, statements that the Hunter Biden laptop was true, and opposition to policies of the government officials in power. All were suppressed. It is quite telling that each example or category of suppressed speech was conservative in nature. The court further writes, the United States government seems to have assumed a role similar to an Orwellian ministry of truth. Specific to the FBI, the court said this: the FBI's failure to alert social media companies that the Biden laptop story was real and not Russian disinformation is particularly troubling. The FBI had the laptop in their possession since December 2019 and had warned social media companies repeatedly to look out for, quote, hack and dump operation by the Russians prior to the 2020 election. Even after Facebook specifically asked whether the laptop story was Russian disinformation, the FBI refused to comment, resulting in social media companies' suppression of this story, and as a result, millions of our fellow citizens did not hear the story prior to the November 3rd, 2020 election. Additionally, the FBI was included in industry meetings, bilateral meetings, received and forwarded alleged misinformation to social media companies, and actually misled companies in regard to the laptop story. When the court says the FBI misled, that's a nice way of saying they lied. They lied, and as a result, important information was kept from we the people days before the most important election we have, election of President of the United States, election of the Commander-in-Chief. In a survey last fall, 4 out of 5 Americans said they believe there's a two-tiered system of justice in America today. They said that because there is. They said that because of what they've witnessed. Think about what Americans have seen. National School Board Association, left-wing political group, writes the White House and asks them to treat parents at school board meetings as terrorists. And the Garland Justice Department does just that. They put together a memo, set up a dedicated line of threat communication, a snitch line on parents. As a result, parents get investigated by our FBI, get a threat tag associated with their name, 25 of them, because whistleblowers came and told us were investigated by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Americans have seen the FBI's Richmond field office put together a memorandum saying pro-life Catholics are extremists. They've seen 20 FBI agents, SWAT team members, show up at the home of Mark Houck and arrest him in front of his wife and 7 children, even though he had indicated he'd be happy to turn himself in. And what was he arrested for? Him and his 12-year-old son were praying outside an abortion facility. Some guy starts screaming in his son's face, and he did what frankly any dad would do, defended his child. What's interesting is the National School Board Association apologized for the letter, but the Attorney General refuses to rescind his directive. The FBI did rescind, thank goodness, the Richmond Catholic Memorandum, but they refuse to tell Congress who wrote it and who approved it. And Mr. Houck, when he got his day in court, he was acquitted by a jury of his peers. American speech is censored, parents are called terrorists, Catholics are called radicals, and I haven't even talked about the spying that took place of a presidential campaign or the raiding of a former president's home. But maybe what's more frightening is what happens if you come forward and tell Congress. If you're a whistleblower, come tell the legislature, come tell the Congress what's going on. Look out. You will be retaliated against. Ask Garrett O'Boyle, who told Congress about these issues. Took his clearance, they took his pay, they took his kids' clothes. Ask Gary Shapley, 14-year veteran at the IRS, handled some of the biggest international tax fraud cases at the agency. He comes forward, and the Justice Department kicks him off the case. But here's what's truly unbelievable. Here's what's amazing. With all that history, with all that, the Justice Department and the FBI want the taxpayers they censored, the parents they labeled, the pro-life Catholics they called radical, they want them to pay for a new FBI headquarters. And they want FISA reauthorization of the 702 program in its current form. It's in the director's opening statement. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. There are 204,000 reasons why Republicans will oppose FISA reauthorization in its current form. 204,000 times the FBI improperly searched the 702 database. And unlike the FBI censorship, in the court's opinion, that was focused on conservatives, the FBI's illegal scrutiny wasn't just limited to conservatives. BLM supporters were illegally scrutinized by the FBI as well. And I hope our Democrat friends will join us in opposing reauthorization of Section 702 the way it's currently done. And I think they will. And I hope they will work with us in the appropriations process to stop the weaponization of the government against the American people and end this double standard that exists now in our justice system. With that, I yield to the gentleman from New York for an opening statement. From Kentucky is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the chairman. Director Wray, in light of information provided to us about the FBI's investigation of the January 6th pipe bombs, in an interview with Assistant Director Stephen D'Antuono, Chairman Jordan and I sent you a letter a month ago. Some of the information that we found in that interview was that phone data that could have helped to identify the pipe bomber was corrupted, was unusable. He also wasn't sure who found or how the second bomb was found at the DNC. Do you know how the second bomb was found at the DNC? And when do you plan on answering our letter?
Well, as to the letter, I will work with the department to make sure we can figure out what information we can provide. As you know, this is a very active, ongoing investigation, and there are some restrictions on that, but we will do our
we
best
can
to
handle
respond.
classified information, and we fund your department, and so you need to provide that.
It's not, respectfully, it's not an issue of classification. It's an issue of commenting on ongoing criminal investigations, which is something that by longstanding department policy we are restricted in doing. And in fact, the last administration actually strengthened those policies partly
That's
because—
not our policy, though, and we fund you, so let's move on. Do you know how the second pipe bomb, can you tell us how the second pipe bomb was found at the DNC?
Again, I'm not going to get into that here.
900 days ago is when this happened, and you said you had total confidence we'd apprehend the subject. We've found video that looks like somebody, a passerby, miraculously found this pipe bomb at the DNC and then notified the police. Miraculously, I say, because it was specifically the precise time to cause the maximum distraction from the events going on at the Capitol. Can you show this video that we have, please? I'd like to know if the director has seen this. This is somebody with a mask on, wearing a hat. They're walking in front of the DNC, which is out of the view on the right-hand side. You'll see him come into view. He goes to one police car. He goes to another police car. He's holding a backpack. He's got a mask on. He's talking to the police. And within a minute, they start scrambling. You'll see the camera turn to the pipe bomb, the location of the pipe bomb. By the way, that's, I believe the Metro police are now getting out of their car, and that's Vice President-elect's detail in the black SUV, I believe, parked about 30 feet from the pipe bomb, eating lunch. Okay, now we go over to the location of the pipe bomb. The cameras are scrambling. It appears to me that that's not a coincidence, that the person with the backpack who walked by that bench and then went up to the police and the detail didn't do that accidentally. They had a purpose in mind, and that what transpired after that was the result of information that person gave to them. If that person found the pipe bomb, would they be a suspect?
Well, again, I don't want to speculate about specific individuals. I will tell you that we have done thousands of interviews, reviewed something like 40,000 video files, of which this is one, assessed 500-something tips.
Have you interviewed that person?
Devices. We have conducted all logical investigative steps and interviewed all logical individuals at this point.
Then it's 900 days. You need to tell us what you found, because we're finding stuff you haven't released into the public.
And the gentleman from Texas recognized.
Thank the chairman. Thank you, Director Wray, for appearing. Brian Auten was one of the FBI intelligence analysts who interviewed Igor Danchenko, the principal source of the Steele dossier, in January 2017, correct?
I believe that's in the Durham report.
And Danchenko explained that the dossier allegations were BS, yet the FBI did not reveal that to the FISA court. Instead, the FBI continued to use those allegations in two more sworn FISA applications about President Trump and Putin, correct?
Well, again, I want to let Mr. Durham's report speak for itself.
Okay, but as director of the FBI, those are the facts of the FBI under your watch. The FBI conducted—
No, sir, I'm sorry. It's important, not under my watch. Those are the facts.
I'm getting to the part under your watch.
Okay.
The FBI conducted an internal investigation of Auten and sought to suspend him, but Auten appealed, correct?
I can't discuss a specific pending personnel matter.
Okay, well, according to recent reports, those are the facts. Nevertheless, in 2020, after Senators Grassley and Johnson highlighted evidence of potential financial crimes and corruption against the Biden family, the FBI assigned Auten to compile an assessment which was used to characterize the Biden revelations as Russian disinformation. The evidence Grassley and Johnson had collected were mostly financial records and could easily have been corroborated as authentic. And by then, the FBI had the Hunter laptop in its possession for over a year, so it knew the lucrative payments of the Bidens from corrupt and anti-American regimes were authentic. How on earth did the FBI empower an agent under investigation for potentially corrupt performance and abuse of FISA in one politically flawed investigation, a Democrat operative-driven case against President Trump, to play a key role and to undermine a second politically fraught investigation, a case against the Bidens. How's that possible? How can you allow that to occur in the Federal Bureau of Investigation, as my colleagues on the other side of the aisle say, the elite law enforcement agency of the United States? How does that occur?
I can't, at the moment, discuss a pending personnel matter. I can tell you that every employee who in any way touched the Crossfire Hurricane matter has been referred to our Office of Professional Responsibility, our disciplinary
Are you
arm.
concerned about this activity by the FBI and what was communicated to the FISA court? Does that concern you as the director of the FBI?
I consider the conduct that was described in the Durham report as totally unacceptable and unrepresentative of what I see from the FBI every day and must never be allowed to happen again.
And have there been consequences as a result? Is Mr. Auten, has he had consequences?
Well, again, I can't speak to pending personnel matters. As you would perhaps remember from your own time in law enforcement, because we were working closely with Mr. Durham and I assigned agents to help him, at his request, we slowed down the administrative process to allow his investigation to complete itself. Now that it is complete, our personnel processes are very much ongoing.
Well, I think it is more than troubling that under your watch, we see that this continued to occur, and you have Auten continued to be empowered after there was an investigation and after there was an effort by the FBI to look into why he would go to the FISA court and give wrong information. I mean, the issue here has been wrapped up in a cloud of politics, but the fact is the American people deserve to know how the FISA court is being abused and how it's being abused against the former president and against them, in light of the reports that we saw Mr. Johnson from Louisiana put forward that was in a court filing and a court report. I want to move on to another topic. On September 23rd, 2022, 20 heavily armed agents stormed the home of Mark Houck. You're familiar with this?
I'm familiar with the Houck case a little bit, yes.
And this was after Mr. Houck's lawyer reached out and said he would appear voluntarily because the incident in question occurred almost a year earlier in October of 2021, so a year earlier. And the question here I have, local authorities investigated the incident but concluded there was no case. After the jury met for roughly an hour, Houck was acquitted. How on earth did Mark Houck end up having the FBI send several armed agents along with local authorities to arrest him at gunpoint? And do you approve it? Did you approve of that?
Well, let me start where you ended. Decisions about the manner of an arrest are not something that the FBI director approves. I defer to and rely on the judgment of the experienced career agents on the ground who have both the most intimate understanding of the facts and of the training experience to decide how best to effectuate an arrest.
Do you know who did order it?
And my understanding is that that arrest was conducted in our Philadelphia division by career agents with a combined 40 years of FBI experience.
Do you approve of the raid now in retrospect? Do you think it was appropriate? Do you think it was appropriate for a father to have armed FBI agents along with local agents go to his home, arrest him at gunpoint for alleged violation of the FACE Act a year after the alleged incident, after the father had said through his lawyer that he would appear voluntarily? Do you believe that FBI agents should go to the home of a father in Philadelphia suburbs?
I'm not going to second guess the judgment of the career agents on the ground who made the determination.
But your job is to second guess and look at what they are doing. Your job is to review what they do. Your job is to protect the American people from a tyrannical FBI storming the home of an American family.
I could not disagree more with your description of the FBI as tyrannical. And
you don't believe it's tyrannical that FBI agents were a part of storming a father's home in suburban Philadelphia?
Mr. Chairman. Time of the gentleman's expired. The witness may respond, and then we'll move to our next witness.
Sir, respectfully,
member.
They did not storm his house. They came to his door. They knocked on his door and identified themselves. They asked him to exit. He did without incident. Whenever our agents, well, not at gunpoint, whenever our agents conduct an arrest, they are armed. Our agents are armed virtually all the time, as you may remember from your own experience as a prosecutor.
The gentleman yields back. The ranking member has a unanimous consent. We're going to do one more on our side, then we'll take a break and come back for the remaining members. The gentlelady from Wyoming is recognized.
Yes, Director Wray, we have established that the FBI and other federal agencies met weekly with executives from major social media companies, including Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Google, Microsoft, LinkedIn, and Yahoo and Verizon. Were you involved in any of those meetings, yes or no?
I wasn't involved in the kind of meetings that you're talking about, or I didn't participate, I guess, in meetings like that.
Okay. Are these meetings still occurring, and if so, how frequently?
Well, right now, as you may know, there is a preliminary injunction that's been entered.
Prior to the preliminary injunction, were these weekly meetings taking place?
I don't know if weekly meetings occurred, again, before the injunction, but certainly we've been very open about this, engaged with social media companies.
Does the FBI intend to continue to have such meetings leading up to the 2024 election to police election-related speech?
Well, we're not going to be policing election-related speech.
That's what you previously did.
I do not agree with that description.
Okay, well, here's what
I
I would say. This committee has learned that the FBI acted to, quote, discredit leaked information about Hunter Biden before and after it was published, that, quote, Twitter's contact with the FBI was constant and pervasive, and as if it were a subsidiary, and that, quote, a surprisingly high number are requests by the FBI for Twitter to take action on election misinformation, even involving joke tweets from low follower accounts. Are you aware that that has been reported?
I am aware of some of what the committee has found in its report.
Okay.
But I will add that I'm not sure I agree with the findings.
But that's what we found. Director Wray, you and I both know that the federal government is forbidden from doing indirectly what it cannot do directly. In other words, neither you nor the FBI have any legal authority to circumvent the First Amendment by using a surrogate to do your dirty work. Yet that is exactly what you have been doing. The Bureau, under your watch, has been using proxies to violate the First Amendment. Were you the person who gave the orders to use these social media companies to violate violate Americans' First Amendment rights?
Again, I don't agree with your description of our engagement with social media companies.
So who made the decision to use social media companies as a proxy to suppress the First Amendment rights of American citizens?
Because I don't believe that's what we did, I'm not sure there's anyone that would have made such a decision.
Do you really expect the American public to believe that you were not involved in the decisions related to using social media companies to suppress the First Amendment rights of American citizens?
I can't help what people will believe or not. I can only speak to what the facts are.
Was anyone ever fired or otherwise reprimanded for pursuing mass censorship? In other words, has anybody been held accountable for taking the actions that were described in the decision by the district court out of Louisiana?
Well, the district court's decision just came out on July 4th.
Has anybody been reprimanded or held accountable for what is?
And at the moment, we have issued guidance to everyone in the organization who could be affected as to how to follow that.
Has anyone been reprimanded?
I'm not going to speak to personnel matters because we have not made any such determination at this stage.
Mr. Wray, I have some letters from Lindsey Graham and Rand Paul that were sent to you on April 20th and June 20th requesting a meeting to discuss the Weapons of Mass Destruction Directorate's work investigating the origins of SARS COVID-19. Your office has never responded to these letters. Do you intend to respond to Senators Lindsey Graham and Rand Paul to find out more information about the origin of COVID-19?
Well, we try hard to respond to all correspondence we get from the Hill. We get a lot.
I assume you'll be responding to
my
this.
intention is that we would have an appropriate response. Sometimes our responses, by longstanding procedure, our responses have to go through the department before they go out, so it could be that it's held up there, but I don't know that that's... I don't know if that's the case in these particular ones.
Senators Graham and Paul should be receiving a response from your office pretty soon.
Some kind of response. As you may know, we were the only agency in the intelligence community until more recently when the Department of Energy did as well to reach the assessment that in our folks' view, we thought it was more likely to be a lab leak.
Okay. Mr. Wray, from the Twitter files, Missouri versus Biden disclosures, the Durham investigation and report, and exposure and collapse of the Russian collusion hoax, the American people fully understand that there is a two-tier justice system that has been weaponized to persecute people based on their political beliefs, and that you have personally worked to weaponize the FBI against conservatives. I asked Mr. Durham about this, to which he answered, I don't think that things can go too much further with the view that law enforcement, particularly the FBI or Department of Justice, runs a two-tiered system of justice. The nation can't stand under those circumstances. Director Wray, what are you prepared to do to reform federal law enforcement in a manner which earns back the trust of the American people?
Well, first off, I would disagree with your characterization of the FBI and certainly your description of my own approach. The idea that I'm biased against conservatives seems somewhat insane to me, given my own personal background. As to how we are approaching our work of protecting the American people and upholding the Constitution, it starts with me having emphasized to all of our folks over and over and over again in everything we do that we need to do the right thing in the right way, and that means following the facts wherever they lead, no matter who likes it. It starts, then goes on from there to all kinds of enhanced procedures, safeguards, approvals, double checks, triple checks, record-keeping requirement, accountability policies, funding of new functions like an Office of Internal Audit that didn't exist before, the installation of an entirely new leadership team from my predecessor, and where I can take action, where we can take action to hold people accountable by removing people from the chain of command.
Gentleladies, time has expired, Director. We will, we're going to take a 30-minute break for votes. We will be back. I'm going to try to start right at 2:15.
Unanimous consent to introduce
Without
the
objections.
to the record.
Without objection, so be entered. We'll start with Ms. Bush and then Mr. Bishop on our side when we return. We'll back. Director, we appreciate those, the whole country does. In fact, I said this in an interview this morning, a TV interview this morning, as two of those agents who served for years in the FBI, did great work, now work for the committee on the Republican staff. And we appreciate the work they did then, the work they're doing now. But they share the same concerns raised by members of the committee. That's why they came to work for us. So I just got a couple other questions. Any of the FBI personnel who did improper queries of the 702 database, have any of those individuals lost their clearance?
Well, we had, depends on how far back you want to go in time. We've had individuals, if you go back to say like 2018, I think was the last I remember, where you had somebody who engaged in intentional conduct and the person, for example, is gone. I think there were security clearances revoked for people back in that time period, but I don't know that we've had somebody who's engaged in, intentional or reckless conduct more recently than that. We have, as you may know, Mr. Chairman, and this actually didn't come up today, but it's important for people to know. We recently put in place a whole new set of accountability policies specifically focused on 702 that go through cascading consequences.
Yep.
And so that's an important
It's been reported that donors of a congressional member of Congress were illegally searched. Has that individual lost their clearance?
I'm not sure I'm familiar with the specific example, so.
Well, it's been widely reported that the donor base for a member of Congress has been searched, and I just wonder if the person responsible for that has had any consequences, like a loss of a security clearance.
I don't know the answer.
Okay. Is the FBI assisting the Secret Service in the investigation as to how cocaine wound up at the White House?
Yes, I want to be a little bit careful about what I can say here because the Secret Service is leading the investigation, but as is standard in an investigation where white powder is found, the FBI's lab personnel did an evaluation to determine whether or not there was a, sort of biological.
Is that the only assistance?
That's the only assistance we've done so far. We have offered the full range of our assistance to the Secret Service if they want to use us for that purpose. But beyond that, I would refer you to the Secret Service.
Is that offer's been denied? Is that what you're saying?
No, I didn't say that. We've offered it to the Secret Service, but beyond that, I would refer to them.
In October of 2020, when Facebook asked the FBI, is the Biden laptop story Russian disinformation? The FBI's answer was no comment. Who gave that answer?
And before you answer, sir, if I might just interject the fact that we agreed that I would have 2 questions and you would have 2 questions.
I think I said a couple questions.
Yeah. And you've asked a couple.
In fact, I know I said a couple questions, but I gave you 5 minutes, so.
But I'll.
Do you want another question?
No, I want us to conclude this hearing, and I
and
respect
we will be
your
done in
prerogative
2 minutes
as the
and
chair.
10 seconds.
Thank you.
And we appreciate that. and we obviously appreciate the director being here. In October 2020, when Facebook asked the FBI, is the Biden laptop story Russian disinformation, the FBI's response was no comment. Do you know who gave that response?
I did not.
The court knew, and the court said it was Laura Demlow. Do you know who Laura Demlow is?
I do know who Laura Demlow is.
And what does she do?
Laura Demlow is an agent in our counterintelligence division, and she currently works with the Foreign Influence Task Force.
Doesn't she head the Foreign Influence Task Force?
I think she leads it, yeah.
She leads the Foreign Influence Task Force. Did you tell her to give that comment?
Did I what now?
Did you instruct anyone, when Facebook asked, did you instruct them to give the no comment?
I don't remember giving any instruction along those lines, although I should say I'm not sure whether Laura Demlow was in that role at the time frame that you described, but
Again, the court in Louisiana said she was, and said when Facebook asked her specifically, she said no comment. And this is the Foreign Influence Task Force leader, Foreign Influence Task Force that you created as director of the FBI, correct? All that's correct. You created the Foreign Influence Task Force.
I did create the Foreign Influence Task Force.
Yeah, you put that together, and she heads it up. Okay. When did you become, how did you become aware of the Catholic memo? The one in Richmond that we've talked about a couple times today.
As I recall, in one of my regular morning meetings, I learned that there was this product, and that was the same day that I ordered that it be removed.
Was that before or after it was already in the press?
That I can't tell you. My guess is it was probably around the same time, but I don't know.
Did you learn about it? Did the people who brought it up to you, did they learn about it from the press, or was it some internal communication?
I can't speak to how they learned about it. I just know that I was told about it by them, and we had a conversation about immediately taking steps that we then did.
We appreciate that. Okay, Director, we appreciate your time today. I know it's been a long day. We already had the unanimous consent from Mr. Gates, so the committee is adjourned.
Now, Director Wray, I'm assuming you've seen and read the letter that Senator Grassley wrote to you and Attorney General Garland on October 24th?
I'm generally aware of it.
Oh, you ought to read it. Let me read some segments to you. The FBI maintained over 40 confidential human sources that provided criminal information related to Joe Biden, James Biden, and Hunter Biden. An essential question that must be answered in this, did the FBI investigate the information or shut it down? Certainly there's a host of reasons to conclude that they attempted to shut it down. It goes on. It has been alleged that the basis for shutting down the investigative activity, shutting it down, was an August 2020 assessment created by FBI Supervisory Intelligence Analyst Brian Auten. That assessment was used by FBI headquarters team to improperly discredit negative Hunter Biden information as disinformation and cause investigative activity to cease. It goes on. Analyst Brian Auten opened the aforementioned assessment, which was used by the Foreign Influence Task Force to seek out CHS holdings at FBI field offices across the country relating to the Biden family and falsely discredit them as foreign disinformation. My staff calls that catch and kill. And by the way, it was that same task force that gave Senator Grassley and I our unsolicited briefing that was later leaked to the media to smear me and impact my 2022 election. Senator Grassley concludes, there appears to be an effort within the Justice Department and FBI to shut down investigative activity relating to the Biden family. Such decisions point to significant political bias infecting the decision-making of not only the Attorney General and FBI Director, but also line agents and prosecutors. Our republic cannot survive such a political infection, and you have an obligation to this country to clear the air. Let me ask another, and by the way, I'd ask that this unanimous consent that this letter be entered in the record, and also this column that appeared in the Wall Street Journal published yesterday. Have you read this one? More on the stifled Hunter Biden probe.
I have seen that.
Okay. We'll enter that in the record. Again, this column is written based on the October 23rd Judiciary Committee interview with former U.S. Attorney Scott Brady, who was tapped by Attorney General Barr to vet information related to Ukrainian corporate corruption and pass along credible material to offices with ongoing investigations. I'll get some highlights here. The FBI office in Pittsburgh couldn't take any steps without the review and approval of FBI headquarters. Mr. Brady describes a reluctance on the part of the FBI to really do any tasking related to allegations of Ukrainian corruption broadly, and then specifically anything that intersected with Hunter Biden and his role in Burisma. FBI headquarters had to sign off on every assignment, no matter how small or routine, and that this sometimes required 17 different people, mostly at the headquarter level. Mr. Brady said he'd never in his DOJ career seen anything like it. Mr. Brady says his office was informed by members of the Pittsburgh FBI team that they had been instructed by headquarters not to affirmatively share information with the Brady team. He said he was surprised to learn that the FBI possessed the Hunter Biden laptop since 2019. He heard that through public reports. Senator Grassley's letter concludes that he has obtained names from his whistleblower, 25 Department of Justice FBI personnel, to interview at a future date, and he's also requesting a bunch of information. Will you provide those FBI personnel for interviews with his office in mind, and will you provide those documents?
Well, I'll have to review the specific requests, and we'll see how we can be helpful.
Okay, well, I'll hand you this letter. Final point I want to make. I was briefed a couple weeks ago by members of the FBI on what Senator Blumenthal are doing to try and unredact a lot of the information on the 9/11 event, okay? Now, the briefers seem to be people of integrity, like I think the vast majority of the men and women that work in the FBI, the 38,000 field agents. So again, they were people with integrity. The problem is that they gave me 3 different examples of redacted and then unredacted to explain it. And the redactions made sense of those 3 examples, but I had to make the point. The problem I have is I simply cannot trust what the FBI is providing me. And I don't say that with any joy in my heart. That's a travesty. The American people want to believe and have trust in the FBI. We want credibility and integrity restored to your institution. But Director Wray, you have not done that since assuming office. And I could go through a long laundry list of the reasons why that trust has been violated. I don't have it right now. I'm happy to sit down and meet with you and go over these things in detail. But I would say, because they asked me, what can we do to restore trust? Start being transparent. My final point is, and this is actually a question, why is it, and this makes no sense, I'm an elected U.S. Senator. I have the highest security clearance. Why is it that unelected members of the FBI can see the documents unredacted, but I can't, even in a secure briefing room? That makes no sense whatsoever, but that's exactly how federal law enforcement, Department of Justice, the FBI, who are the law, remain above the law, remain above scrutiny, and completely scorn our constitutional responsibility and authority to provide oversight. We just can't do it, as the chairman was talking about earlier, about how you've basically ignored his requests for credit for or questions for the record.
Mr. Chairman, may I respond?
You may.
So needless to say, I disagree with your characterization, not only of my own performance, but of our workforce. I will tell you, when it comes to trust and confidence, the number of people applying to be special agents of the FBI has gone up dramatically since I've been FBI director. And in fact, in your home state of Wisconsin, it's gone up about 160-something%, which is one of the highest in the country. So I see an FBI every day that conducts themselves with integrity and professionalism and selflessness and rigor. And I do not accept the characterization of our performance in this particular case.
That is not how I characterized it. I'm talking about partisanship at the top with some specific partisan actors. I said the vast majority of the 38,000 are people of integrity.
And the idea that I, as a Republican appointee and a lifelong Republican, am biased in the way that you are describing makes absolutely no sense.
I'm happy to read you chapter and verse of all the reasons why that credibility has been destroyed.
It's Kamek, who has waved on to the committee for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it's great to be back at Homeland. Secretary Mayorkas, good to see you once again. Director Wray, good to see you, ma'am. Thank you for appearing before the committee today. I'll jump right into it, Director Wray. Recently, I have been apprised of information that is concerning regarding individuals that are encountered at the border who, during the process of interviewing in the field, specifically using an I-213 form. The match for their ID comes back as inconclusive. That information is then subsequently redacted and listed as derogatory. When members of this committee, as well as other committees, have attempted to get access to this information, it has been denied. Why is this information in these field interviews with these individuals who have then subsequently been found to be suspected on the suspected terror watch list? Why is that information derogatory, and why has the FBI neglected to share that information with Congress?
Congressman, I'm not familiar with the particular redactions in question, so I'm happy to have my staff follow up with you and figure out why there's a disconnect. Certainly, I know we've provided all sorts of information to this committee in a variety of forms, and I'm happy to see what it is that's missing and why.
Well, and I think that you have demonstrated a willingness to work with this committee and others. So could you commit in the next 30 days to providing the committee staff on Homeland Security all of the unredacted field interviews?
Well, what I can commit to is that I will follow up with my team to find out what the heck is going on, and if there's information that we can provide that we haven't, we will.
Well, no information should be redacted, and there can be no good reason. If you can't provide me with a reason why the information is listed as derogatory right now, then you should commit to full transparency to Congress. And that can be in a SCIF, that's fine, in a classified setting, but this committee staff should have full access to the field interviews, especially as it pertains to individuals that have been apprehended or encountered at the southwest border with ties to terrorist groups. Yes or no?
I'm not trying to be obtuse, I promise. Since I'm not familiar with the specific redactions, I would ask to be able to go back with my team and find out why it's redacted, and if there's a reason for it that is valid, we will discuss that with you, and if there's not a reason, we will provide you the
Director
information.
Wray, within 30 days, if you can provide this committee in writing a rationale as to why that information is redacted and what classifies it as derogatory, that would be incredibly helpful.
We'd be happy to get back to you
Okay,
within
perfect.
30 days.
And I'm going to follow up because I want to be sensitive to the time here. Can you confirm, I know my colleague, August Pfluger from Texas, had followed up with Secretary Mayorkas on the issue of Uzbek nationals and their ties to the confirmed ISIS smuggling ring. Can you confirm that you are currently actively investigating the Uzbek nationals that were connected to this ISIS smuggling ring? Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am. We have very focused on this particular threat stream. We have a number of active ongoing investigations related to it. I will say that we have so far not identified any intelligence that the individuals came to conduct terrorist attacks, but that's not the same thing as suggesting that we don't take it extremely seriously and that we're not working it very aggressively. We have lots and lots of agents working on this.
But they did come through a connected terrorist network.
The network that is in question has some ties to ISIS, which is part of why we were concerned. That's why we're taking it so seriously. So what I want to be clear about is not in any way to have my answers suggest to you that we're not taking this extremely seriously and that we're not working it very aggressively. I'm just also trying to avoid undue alarm about what we found so far. So far is a key set of words there. So far.
Okay, I'm going to have follow-up questions for the record with you, Director Wray, and Secretary Mayorkas.
Director Wray. Last year, you might recall, sir, our exchange regarding the FBI's involvement on January 6th and prior. I'm happy to jog your memory to quote, according to the record, I asked you, did you have confidential human sources dressed as Trump supporters positioned inside the Capitol on January 6th prior to the doors being opened? You responded, I quote, again, I have to be very careful of what I say. To which I said, it should be a no. Can you not tell the American people no? We did not have confidential human sources dressed as Trump supporters positioned inside the Capitol on January 6th. A year has passed. We sit here again a year later, we the people, still do not have a definitive answer from you or anyone else in the Biden administration regarding the FBI presence and participation in the months leading up to the November election and in the weeks and days prior to January 6th and on January 6th here in D.C.? We can't get a straight answer, although we have a tremendous amount of evidence harvested and reviewed over the course of the last year, which you will see. In September, Stephen D'Artano, formerly in charge of the FBI's field office in Washington, D.C., testified to the House Judiciary Committee that he was aware the FBI informants would attend the Stop the Steal rally thrown on January 6th. You confirmed that the FBI had confidential human sources at the Stop the Steal rally on January 6th here in D.C., sir?
Congressman, as we've discussed before, I'm not going to get into where we have or have not used confidential human sources. But what I can
we'll
tell
move
you,
on.
you asked for a definitive
We'll move
answer.
on. It's my time. You said no, you're not going to answer. That's cool. We're watching.
Mr. Chairman, may I answer the question?
Your moment will come. This is my time. Earlier this year, an FBI informant who is reported to have, quote, under oath, marched to the U.S. Capitol with fellow Proud Boys members on January 6th, close quote. He said he was communicating with his FBI handler while people were entering the U.S. Capitol. Can you confirm that the FBI had that sort of engagement with your own agents embedded into the crowd on January 6th?
If you are asking whether the violence at the Capitol on January 6th was part of some operation orchestrated by FBI sources and or agents, the answer is emphatically
You're saying
not. No.
You're saying no?
Not
Okay.
violence orchestrated by
Let's move
FBI
on.
sources or agents.
Are you familiar with you know what a ghost vehicle is? Director of the FBI certainly should. You know what a ghost bus is?
A ghost bus?
Ghost bus.
I'm not sure I've used that term before.
Okay. Well, it's pretty common in law enforcement. It's a vehicle that's used for secret purposes. It's painted over. These two buses in the middle here, they were the first to arrive at Union Station on January 6th, 0500. I have all this evidence. I'm showing you a tip of this iceberg.
Mr. Chairman.
These two buses
Mr.
are
Chairman.
painted completely white.
Point of order.
Point of order. Sure.
Just run over the time.
I understand, but you'll recall that Ms. Jackson-Lee's been allowed to go 2 minutes before. I've been very fair in letting people finish their questioning throughout my tenure as chairman, and I'll continue to be fair on that regard. But I will make a note to the members, if you could stay as close within your time as possible. We have a lot of people that want to ask these gentlemen questions. So with that, the gentleman yields. But your point, I've been very fair in this, Mr. Ivey, with everybody on this side of the aisle just as much.
I don't think I accuse you of being unfair, Mr. Chairman.
You're making a point. Okay, thank you. I now recognize Mr.
May I
Wray.
close this statement, Mr.
No,
Chairman?
I think your time is expired, Mr.
I note that other members across the aisle have been granted time, and I object to my question being closed. This is a very significant hearing, Mr. Chairman, and these buses are nefarious in nature and were filled with FBI informants dressed as Trump supporters and deployed onto our Capitol on January 6th. Your day is coming, Mr. Wray.
Mr. Higgins.
Mr. Wray, do you remember on October 18th when the Capitol complex was illegally occupied, breaking same laws that you have hunted down Americans for from January 6th? Are you familiar with this?
I don't recognize the picture that you're holding.
Well, because maybe your agents haven't been doing a good job into investigating the organizers that broke the law, illegally occupied this very building that we're sitting in right now, and over 300 of them were arrested. Some of them attacked police officers. I haven't seen on the news where the FBI is hunting them down with helicopters, tanks in the streets, raiding their homes with flashbangs, targeting these people, watching these people, throwing them in jail for them to stay in pre-trial in solitary confinement for years before they ever face trial. You want to know what this says? I'll tell you. This is one of the organizers' phones, and this is a chat, and it says at the top, Global Intifada. Now, while we're talking about terrorism today, Are you familiar with the term intifada?
I've certainly heard the term.
Do you know the definition?
I'm not going to try to define it, but
It means Arab uprising or jihad. Are you concerned about jihad in this country?
I am, and I have consistently testified to that effect.
Yes, but are you interested in using the FBI? You are the director of the FBI. Do you hunt down terrorists in our country? Those that would be responsible for jihad?
Absolutely, and that's why we've had jihadist-inspired terrorism at our highest national threat priority level since the day that I started as FBI director.
Do you still use the Southern Poverty Law Center as a source? You use them. The FBI used the Southern Poverty Law Center as a source when targeting Catholics. Are you still using the Southern Poverty Law Center as a source?
Congresswoman, what I think you're referring to is the so-called Richmond intelligence product, which as soon as I learned about it, I was horrified, withdrew it. We had an inspection done, and part of the problem that we found with that particular product by that particular office is precisely what you're talking about, the reliance on the Southern Poverty Law Center and the way in which they relied on it.
Well, you relied on the Southern Poverty Law Center, but I would have you know, Mr. Wray, that this one right here, this person involved in the global intifada group that illegally, they broke the law, came in and occupied the Cannon Office House building, interrupted Congress, interrupted hearings. Right here, Katrina Bleakley is the lead attorney for the Southern Poverty Law Center. Were you aware of this?
Congresswoman, as I said, I haven't seen the photos that you're holding up before.
Maybe, well, I posted them on my Twitter account. It's public. You know, maybe
I don't
you guys
spend
are,
a lot of time on Twitter.
Well, you know, I'm sure you do, because the Department of Homeland Security, organized with other offices, has censored many Americans, including myself.
I'm not part of the Department of Homeland Security.
Right, Mr. Wray, you should be interested in investigating terrorism, and this right here is proof that we had terrorists in our own office building, global intifada. And you rely on the Southern Poverty Law Centers. Katrina Bleakley is one of the organizers. I'll send this over to your office, so maybe perhaps you can stop targeting innocent grandmothers and veterans who walked through the Capitol on January 6th and might actually go after people tied to Hamas, tied to Hezbollah, and likely Iran.
Senator Ossoff, Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Director, it seems to me that some people should not have power. I don't care how smart they are. I don't care how experienced they are. They just don't have enough maturity or morality or ethics to exercise power. And I am talking, of course, about your predecessor. You have been a significant improvement. Unlike my experience with you, and what I've observed is that unlike your predecessor, you're not egomaniacal, and you're not egocentric, and you're not a self-aggrandizer. You don't run around like your predecessor going, look at me, look at me. You don't leak to the press like the Titanic. And I know that's a low bar, but I appreciate it. You talk a lot about 38,000 women and men in the FBI, the vast majority of whom do an extraordinary job, and I agree with that. Most of those women and men that you're talking about are in your field offices. I'm not saying there aren't some in the Washington office. But the problems we've had with the FBI over the past decade, you've alluded to them, have come primarily out of the Washington office. I listened carefully to your recitation of your efforts to clean that up. But I think most fair-minded Americans still wonder if there has been real accountability. in all cases. And that's the spirit in which I'm going to ask you these questions. Who made the decision at the FBI to raid Mar-a-Lago for those documents?
Well, I'm not sure there's a specific person that made the decision. It was the investigative team that was on that investigation, working with the prosecutors on the case.
Why didn't you just do a consent to search and avoid all the drama?
Well,
you, but whoever made the decision.
Yeah. Well, let me try it this way, because obviously we are talking now about not just an ongoing investigation, that's not just an ongoing investigation that's being led by a special counsel, but an ongoing investigation being led by special counsel that's in front of a court with likely very strong views about what it is I can say publicly, which gets at some of your gracious comments about public commentary about cases. But I think if you, in that particular instance, if you look at the affidavit in support of the search warrant, and more importantly, the pleadings that were filed by the prosecutors in the case, they lay out in a very detailed way all the efforts that were made to ensure compliance short of proceeding to a search, as well as now has been charged, actual obstruction of justice. And so, in my experience, again, speaking more generally now, both as a line prosecutor and now as FBI director, when it comes to obtaining classified information, retrieving it, we typically pursue the least intrusive means possible, but if those don't work, and certainly if there's obstruction of justice, which in this case as found by a probable cause standard by the judge, then it's pretty typical to resort to a search warrant.
Maybe you can respond in writing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Wray, welcome. As you know, I am deeply concerned about the conduct of both the Department of Justice and the FBI, particularly in the last 3 years during the Biden administration. I think the Department of Justice has been profoundly politicized under Attorney General Merrick Garland, and I think the FBI has as well. And unfortunately, I think you've been unwilling to stand up to senior career officials in the FBI who's allowed the FBI to be politicized. I'll tell you, I regularly speak with FBI agents across the country who are unhappy about the integrity of the institution being weakened because DOJ is being treated as a political weapon. I want to talk in particular about the investigation into multiple allegations of corruption concerning Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. Because the Department of Justice has, I think from the outset, tried at every step to stop investigation into corruption from Joe Biden. As you're aware, a WhatsApp text message was sent to Henry Zhao, a senior Chinese communist, from Hunter Biden that reads as follows. I'm sitting here with my father, and we would like to understand why the commitment made has not been fulfilled. Tell the director that I would like to resolve this now before it gets out of hand. And now means tonight. And Z, if I get a call or text from anyone involved in this other than you, Zhang, or the chairman, I will make certain that between the man sitting next to me and every person he knows, and my ability to hold a grudge, that you will regret not following my direction. I am sitting here waiting for the call with my father. Now, Democrats and those in the media trying to defend the White House repeatedly say there is no direct evidence of Joe Biden's involvement in his son's corruption. Well, this is a text that is direct evidence, that is stating that it is his father that is going to retaliate. Now, an IRS whistleblower, Gary Shapley, testified before the House of Representatives that the natural step he wanted to follow was to determine whether Joe Biden was in fact sitting next to his father when this threat was made to extort millions of dollars from a Chinese communist. And what the IRS whistleblower testified is that when he tried to find out whether Joe Biden was sitting next to Hunter, that the DOJ blocked getting the GPS data on Joe Biden's phone? Did the FBI try to ascertain where Hunter Biden was and where Joe Biden was when this text was sent?
Well, I think the questions you're asking go to the ongoing investigation being led by Special Counsel Weiss, and so I'm not going to be able to discuss what is or isn't in scope.
So look, there's been testimony under oath from the IRS whistleblower that you did not seek the GPS data. And you're right, David Weiss, the special prosecutor, is in charge of it. And it is David Weiss and his underlings who, according to the IRS whistleblowers, have alleged that they're the ones trying to stop the investigation. They allowed the statute of limitations to run on many of the most serious violations. Not only that, IRS whistleblower Shapley testified that on September 3rd, Assistant U.S. Attorney Leslie Wolf explicitly told investigators that despite having probable cause to search, quote, there is no way a search warrant would be approved when the evidence in question was located inside of Vice President Biden's guest house. Wolf stated that, quote, the optics prevented such a search. Is the FBI, do they make a routine practice of allowing partisan political optics to prevent investigating serious evidence of corruption?
My instructions to our people on this and on every other investigation are that we are to follow the facts wherever they lead, no matter who likes it, no matter what political influence
Then why
there
did
may
you
be
get
out
the
there.
GPS data on where Hunter Biden and Joe Biden were?
Again, Senator, with respect, I can't discuss
But it's
an
not
ongoing
with respect.
investigation.
And Director Wray, you and I have gone round and round on this because I understand. Anytime you're asked about this, the answer is it's an ongoing investigation. Of course, the investigation isn't ongoing. You're not doing the work. You got whistleblowers pointing out that you're not doing the work, and you are hiding behind the skirts of the Attorney General. Look, the whistleblower also testified that the Attorney General, when he came before Congress, go to the next chart, came before Congress, lied under oath to this committee. The Attorney General testified to this committee in response to my questioning. I have pledged not to interfere with the Hunter Biden investigation, and I have carried through on that pledge. The IRS whistleblowers have alleged the Attorney General lied under oath, a felony. Was the Attorney General telling the truth when he said this? Do we have the chart? We don't have the chart. Was the Attorney General telling the truth when he said, I have pledged not to interfere with the Hunter Biden investigation, and I have carried through on my pledge?
Again, I can't speak to the Attorney General's testimony. I can only tell you what my instructions have been to our people, and I
Has there
expect those
been
to be
political
followed.
interference in the investigation into Hunter Biden and Joe Biden?
Not that I have experienced.
Were the investigators allowed to investigate whether Joe Biden was complicit in the corruption?
Again, there is an ongoing investigation.
I'm asking you about
being led.
corruption from DOJ. Were they allowed to investigate Joe Biden, or is the whistleblower telling the truth that DOJ said Joe Biden's off limits, no questions about the big guy?
And as to what is in scope or not in scope of the ongoing investigation, I would refer you to Special Counsel Weiss. That is not me hiding behind anything, Senator. That is a longstanding policy that has been in place
Director
through
Wray,
multiple administrations,
you have a
going back years and years and
have a
years.
responsibility to the FBI, not to allow it to be a partisan tool and a partisan weapon. The testimony, and by the way, the FBI has done nothing.
And I have not, and I will not.
Have you opened an investigation into whether the Attorney General lied under oath to Congress and whether the Attorney General obstructed justice?
I'm not going to go down that road here.
I know you're not. That's the point. Nobody thinks you've opened an investigation because you're not willing to. And the amazing thing is, Director Wray, I've known you 30 years. You're not a partisan Democrat. You're simply sitting blithely by while career partisans in your agency allow it to be weaponized. And you are damaging the FBI, and you are damaging the Department of Justice. Let me ask you also, the whistleblower testified that investigators wanted to execute a search warrant on a storage unit used by Hunter Biden, and instead they tipped off Hunter Biden's lawyer before the search warrant was carried out. Is it typical FBI practice to tip off the subject of a search warrant before the search warrant so they can remove any evidence that's incriminating?
What is typical is that when you're dealing with an individual who has a protective detail, it is typical for agents to be in contact with the subject's protective detail.
Does the protective detail guard the storage unit?
Again, I can't speak to the storage unit specifically. What I can tell you is that when it comes to...
Why would the FBI tip off the subject of a search warrant about the storage unit that was going to be searched beforehand? Does that not undermine the very essence of an investigation that DOJ is purporting to undertake?
Again, I'm not going to be able to discuss specific investigative steps that we're taking.
But who is? If you're not, nobody answers these questions, and it's why people are furious with the cover-up, because you don't believe the FBI is accountable to Congress or to the American people.
Your time is up. Director Wray has requested a 5-minute recess. 5 minutes.
Let me just, Senator, if I might just quickly respond and then go to the break. Thank you. I understand why this is frustrating. I do. But it is also the case that these policies that I am referring to about my inability to discuss ongoing investigations and certainly internal deliberations related to ongoing investigations are policies that have not only been in place for many, many years through multiple administrations of both parties, but in fact, these were policies that were actually strengthened under the last administration and that my predecessor was faulted in a fairly scathing Inspector General report for not following. And so I keep that in my mind.
You have an obligation to call it out.
Engaged in this job. Thank you.
You have an obligation to call out corruption.
Be useful. Thank you. Thanks, Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Whitehouse. Senator Grassley.
You testified before the Senate Intelligence Committee that the Richmond Field Office anti-Catholic memo was, quote, a product by one field office, end of quote. You testified before the House Judiciary Committee that the memo was, quote, a single product of a single field office, end quote. But the Richmond memo says 2 other field offices of the FBI were involved and that information had been redacted in versions provided to the Congress. Why did the FBI redact that critical information? And second, did you review the unredacted version before giving your previous testimony?
So, Senator, I think that this notion that other field offices were involved is a garble, and let me explain why I say that. The only involvement of the 2 other field offices was the Richmond authors of the product included 2 sentences or something or thereabouts referencing each of these other offices' cases, and they sent those sentences about the other offices' cases to them, not the whole product, and asked them, hey, did we describe your case right? That's all the other offices had. So it was a single field office's product, and I stand by that.
Did you review the unredacted memo before giving your previous testimony?
I have reviewed the unredacted memo. Exactly when I reviewed it, I can't as I sit here right now, tell you.
Okay. In July of this year, I made public what's now known as the Biden family 1023 FBI document. I've also written you several letters that about the same, mostly recently, I think October 24th. That letter of October said in part that the confidential human source in the Biden family, 1023, was not connected to known sources of Russian information. That confidential human source is also reportedly a high-paid, long-running FBI source that the FBI has used in many investigative matters. According to former Attorney General Bill Barr, Barr said that 1023 was deemed sufficiently credible for further investigation. On May 31st of this year, Chairman Comer and I had a call with you. On that call, you told us that the Biden Family 23 is related to an ongoing investigative matter. Now, very clearly, these data points show indicators of credibility. This question for you, this FBI 1023 was serialized on June 30th, 2020, over 3 years ago. When were you first made aware of 1023?
Well, I don't know that I could give you the exact date, but I can tell you that, that I learned of the 1023 much, much, much more recently than anything around 2020, that's for sure.
This is a public document. You have an obligation to tell this committee what you knew about it, when you knew about it, and if you can't give us that information, I guess I better go on. Are there additional FBI-generated 1023s that reference a bribery scheme involving the Biden family, and if so, how many and what are their dates?
Well, Senator, now you're asking questions that relate directly to Special Counsel Weiss's ongoing investigation, and respectfully, I can't really discuss anything related to that investigation. I would refer you to him for that.
The 1023 references alleged text, financial records, and audio tapes that prove some sort of scheme involving money with Biden people. These are discrete documents that can be obtained if they exist when a high-paid, long-used federal confidential human source provides the FBI with evidence that different types of records exist that prove a crime involving a political official. Then standard FBI practice is to take steps to obtain that evidence. Would you agree with that, what I've said so far about the FBI policy? And if not, why not?
Well, certainly I would expect people to do appropriate follow-up on anything in a 1023, but obviously every one of those instances is very fact-specific and case-specific, case-dependent.
Okay, that answer is okay. So then, based upon what you just told me, did the FBI seek these records in this matter?
Well, let me separate into two different things here. When it comes to the investigation being led by Special Counsel Weiss, which is being supported by our Baltimore field office, that one I'm not going to be able to discuss because it's an ongoing investigation. When it comes to the assessment that occurred in being run out of the office of our field office in Pittsburgh, and the U.S. Attorney, Mr. Brady, as selected by Attorney General Barr to look at all of this back in the earlier period you're talking about, my understanding is that there was agreement among the team about what steps needed to be taken and with the closing of that assessment.
Have you communicated with White House officials or used a third party to do so about anything relating to the 1023 as it involves people in the Biden family? And if so, who and when?
No.
Okay. I want to go to sexual misconduct by the FBI. On October the 5th, 2022, I sent you a letter and later made FBI records public that showed widespread sexual misconduct in FBI against females. The data also showed that hundreds of FBI personnel retired to avoid discipline and that senior high-level officials received reduced punishment, if any at all. On October the 6th, the FBI told the Associated Press that it intended to respond to me first and declined to provide sexual misconduct data to the press at that time. It's over 1 year later and the FBI has failed to provide this data to me. The FBI's blatant lack of action indicates it isn't taking misconduct against women in the workplace seriously. Why has the FBI failed to provide that very important data to this committee? And when will it finally be produced, as you told the FBI told the Associated Press you were going to?
Well, first let me say I could not disagree more strongly that we don't take it seriously. I can tell you I take misconduct, sexual misconduct against our own employees extremely seriously, and we've put in place all sorts of new procedures and policies to deal with that and to communicate in no uncertain terms how strongly I feel about that. As to the responsiveness to your letter, let me follow up with my team and find out where that stands. But I do want to make sure that there's not any confusion, none, about how seriously I take this topic.
Okay, then where's the data, if that's what you're going to be willing to take it so seriously?
I will follow up with you about your letter.
Thank you, Senator Grassley. Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much.
Of course, as you know as well as I do, that the FBI cannot censor American speech. Talks about abridging speech, that our First Amendment does. At one time, I think it was during your tenure, the FBI had 80 FBI agents working with social media, encouraging social media to take down accounts and remove, quote, disinformation and election interference. A district court found that the FBI and other agencies asked social media platforms to remove content and to change their moderation policies in a way that violated the First Amendment. And it went up to the Fifth Circuit. The Fifth Circuit limited the injunction, but here's what the Fifth Circuit said. The FBI, quote, likely coerced the platforms into moderating content and encouraged them to do so by effecting changes in their moderation policies, end quote, in violation of the First Amendment. The FBI agreed with the plaintiffs that, quote, I'm quoting the Fifth Circuit, federal agents ran afoul of the First Amendment by coercing and significantly encouraging social media platforms to censor disfavored speech, including by threats of adverse government action, like antitrust enforcement and legal reforms. That's serious. Is the Fifth Circuit wrong?
Well, as you may know, first off, let me just say the opinions talk about a whole bunch of other executive agencies besides the FBI, and I'm not going to speak to what the other agencies did or didn't do. But
well, you weren't the only one. It was the White House. It was Homeland Security. But your folks were there too, all 80 of them, 80 agents.
Well, but
combing social media every day, calling Twitter, calling Facebook, take that down. Get rid of that account. And it wasn't just on election interference. It was on COVID vaccines. It was on lockdowns.
So a couple things, and I appreciate the opportunity to clarify this. So first, on things like COVID vaccines and stuff like that, the FBI had no role in telling anybody to take anything down. In fact, as you may know, the FBI was the only agency back at that time, and the only agency in the entire intelligence community to reach the conclusion to moderate confidence that the origins of the pandemic were most likely a lab leak in China. We were the only agency, so we most certainly were not encouraging anybody to communicate differently on that. Second, even on the topics we did communicate with social media companies about, from everything I've seen, we in fact did not instruct anybody to take that information down. As to the Fifth Circuit's opinion, as you may also know, we actually hotly contest a lot of the findings, and not just the legal conclusions, but the actual factual findings, and the department has sought Supreme Court review, asked them to vacate the injunction. The Supreme Court's not only vacated the injunction, but granted cert, so I probably should leave it at that.
Let me stop you a second. I've gone way over. I want to ask you one last question. We had a controversy during the election about Mr. Hunter Biden's laptop. And at that time, you had 80 agents interfacing with social media, doing whatever they were doing. The FBI had the Hunter Biden laptop, got it on December 9th, 2019. The New York Post story, which a lot of the social media companies at the suggestion of government took down. The story came out on 10/14/2020. Why didn't the FBI just say, hey, the laptop's real? Why didn't you just tell everybody the laptop's real? We're not vouching for what's on it, but it's real. This isn't a fiction.
Well, as you might imagine, the FBI cannot, especially in a time like that, be talking about an ongoing investigation. Second, I would tell you that at least my understanding is that both the FBI folks involved in the conversations and the Twitter folks involved in the conversations both say that the FBI did not direct Twitter to suppress.
But others were
story.
in government.
Well, I can't speak to others in government. That's part of the point that I was trying to make, because the Fifth
Yes, sir,
Circuit's
but
opinion.
you're the FBI. You're not part of the White House and part of Homeland Security. You're not supposed to be political. You see all this controversy going on. Why didn't the FBI say, time out, folks, we're not getting in the middle of this, but the laptop's real?
Again, we have to be very careful about what we can say, especially in the middle of an election season, because that's precisely some of the problems that led to my predecessors' negative findings from the Inspector General.
Did you hear a gavel?
Thank you, Senator
heard a
Kennedy.
gavel.
Thank you, Senator.
Let me ask you about some of the disturbing allegations that have come out of Special Counsel Jack Smith's political crusade against President Trump. And we've seen a heavily redacted search warrant. Here you go with the first page. Here you've got a page that's in print, another in print, another in print, attachment B in print, all about the subject account. Page 3 that I'm going to come back to in a minute, and then look at the rest. Redactions, redactions, redacted, fully redacted, fully redacted, fully redacted, there and there. So that's very helpful. When things are so heavily redacted, you can't get to the information. Now, Tennesseans are very concerned about two tiers of justice and weaponizing of the government. But what we see from this search warrant, and here it is on page, let me go to page 2 first. That gives you what they're getting from the subject account, which is Trump's account. You're going to see that on page 1 and page 2, and the information that is there. They're wanting to get at his Twitter account everybody that had access to it and all the information. Well, then when you go to page 3, they are going to subpoena all data and information that is associated with this, and anybody that reposted information on this that favorited or retweeted post by the account, as well as all tweets that include the username associated, all synced, all contacts, and this covers October 2020 to January 2021. Are you aware of this?
I've seen some of the media reporting about it, but obviously this is a matter
You
that's being
agree
led
with
by
this?
Well, again, this is an ongoing investigation being led by a special counsel, and there are all kinds of court restrictions that apply.
Somebody approved a search warrant for everybody that was retweeting or reposting from the Ayatollah's account. Have they gone to his account prior to October 7th and looked at that? This is such an invasion of free speech. And as we talk with you about social media and what is going on with social media, we're concerned about this. You know, if I liked a tweet from President Trump, if anybody on this side of the dais retweeted a tweet from President Trump, according to this, Jack Smith could go pull everything affiliated with our Twitter account. If anything that came from that real Donald Trump showed up in our feed, do you think that this is an infringement of my free speech?
Well, let me say this. I certainly understand the concern, but what I would tell you is,
so.
but what I would tell you is that this investigation being led by the special counsel. It's not appropriate for me to comment on that ongoing investigation. It's also under the supervision of a court, which
Ongoing
includes the search warrant.
investigation is code word for we are stonewalling. And we hear this from you all repeatedly, and it's really quite frustrating.
No, ma'am, and I understand why it's frustrating, but that policy about not commenting on ongoing investigations is one that goes back decades. Republican and Democratic administrations. It's not something that's just invented.
These investigations are not coming to completion. Thank you, Mr.
Senator Blackburn, before you leave, I want to make a point for the record, since I understand you made some statements about the Jeffrey Epstein flight logs. There's a Fox reporter in the hallway who asked me about this, and I said I had not spoken to you one time about this issue. I think you'll back me up on that. I'm not mistaken. I didn't know that this was even a subject of your amendments, which, if you'll recall, you were the first on the list until the 2-hour rule was invoked. I don't know anything about this request on your part. I'll be happy to discuss it with you. But I haven't done any discussion with you to this point, correct?
Mr. Chairman, I know, and I think you're fully aware that I had 2 amendments, one dealing with Epstein and Sotomayor. I brought it up previously. We have such an issue in this nation with the sex trafficking and human trafficking rings that have proliferated across this country, and it is damaging the lives of women and girls. We have got to step up and help them. Getting to the bottom of what happened with this Jeffrey Epstein case is going to be an important thing to do, and it should be at the top of this committee's to-do list as we fight some of this proliferation of CSAM.
There were 122 amendments, I believe, filed. I did not know that you would have
177.
Thank you, Senator Booker. Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here. The last few weeks, I've been demanding some answers on Jeffrey Epstein's crimes and trying to get these flight records. I've offered amendments to a subpoena, trying to get that, and kind of been stonewalled on it, but I think having transparency around Jeffrey Epstein's conduct and this massive sex trafficking ring that he built is important. And of course, you've had the chairman, Senator Hirano, Senator Ossoff, all who have mentioned our concerns with what is happening with CSAM, what is happening with sex trafficking. But in light of this, in looking at some of the survivors from the Epstein issues, there are disturbing allegations that the FBI failed to investigate the sex trafficking allegations. And indeed, one survivor says that the FBI, even after she brought forward repeatedly content about his conduct, that the FBI refused to investigate her claims, even though she said the allegations were there on both the sex trafficking and the child sexual abuse material. And I want to know why or what awareness you have of the FBI's failure to investigate these claims. And I want to get you on the record, since numerous survivors have said the FBI did not show up to help them. What specifically has the FBI done to investigate the claims that Epstein's and others participated in, produced, possessed, and distributed CSAM?
Well, first, let me say I recall very well that you have a very specific and longstanding interest, not just in child sexual exploitation, but in human trafficking as a cousin of that. And we appreciate your focus on it and your support of the importance of that part of our mission. As to the Epstein case specifically, I will tell you it's been a while since I looked at that case. Obviously, we worked together with prosecutors to bring charges before he...
I realize that.
Yeah.
But what we need from you is a complete investigation of why the FBI did not take this up, and then getting to the bottom of what is appearing to be an enormous sex trafficking ring, and listening to these survivors. You know, and as I said, I've tried to get a subpoena on the flight logs, which I think is important to this. I think people need to know who was on those planes and how often they were on those planes. I think people who invest in companies would want to know if there are people from their C-suite. And as we go through this, should those logs be made public? They've been heavily redacted.
Well, as I said, it's been a while since I looked at the specific case. I can tell you that we've been increasing year over year, both the number of agents focused on these kinds of cases, the number of victims we've rescued, and so onto this specific case. Let me offer to have let me get with my team and figure out if there's more information we can provide to you.
That would be great. Yeah. We have never, even through the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, we never got to the bottom of this, and we have these survivors who say, oh, there is so much more. They swept it under the rug, and that is wrong, and you need to right that wrong.
And Director Wray, you and I have gone round and round on this, because I understand anytime you're asked about this, the answer is it's an ongoing investigation. Of course, the investigation isn't ongoing. You're not doing the work. You got whistleblowers pointing out that you're not doing the work, and you are hiding behind the skirts of the Attorney General. Look, the whistleblower also testified that the Attorney General, when he came before Congress, go to the next chart, came before Congress, lied under oath to this committee. The Attorney General testified to this committee in response to my questioning. I have pledged not to interfere with the Hunter Biden investigation, and I have carried through on that pledge. The IRS whistleblowers have alleged the Attorney General lied under oath, a felony. Was the Attorney General telling the truth when he said this? Do we have the chart? We don't have the chart. Was the Attorney General telling the truth when he said, I have pledged not to interfere with the Hunter Biden investigation, and I have carried through on my pledge?
Again, I can't speak to the Attorney General's testimony. I can only tell you what my instructions have been to our people, and I expect those to be followed. Has there been political interference in the investigation into Hunter Biden and Joe Biden? Not that I have experienced.
Were the investigators allowed to investigate whether Joe Biden was complicit in the corruption?
Again, there is an ongoing investigation.
I'm asking you about corruption from DOJ. Were they allowed to investigate Joe Biden, or is the whistleblower telling the truth that DOJ said Joe Biden's off limits, no questions about the big guy?
And as to what is in scope or not in scope of the ongoing investigation, I would refer you to Special Counsel Weiss. That is not me hiding behind anything, Senator. That is a longstanding policy that has been in place through multiple administrations,
you have a
going back years and years and years.
You have a responsibility to the FBI, not to allow it to be a partisan tool and a partisan weapon. The testimony, and by the way, the FBI has done nothing.
And I have not, and I will not.
Have you opened an investigation into whether the Attorney General lied under oath to Congress and whether the Attorney General obstructed justice?
I'm not going to go down that road here.
I know you're not. That's the point. Nobody thinks you've opened an investigation because you're not willing to. And the amazing thing is, Director Wray, I've known you 30 years. You're not a partisan Democrat. You're simply sitting blithely by while career partisans in your agency allow it to be weaponized. And you are damaging the FBI, and you are damaging the Department of Justice. Let me ask.
Thanks, Senator Rono. Senator Holy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Wray, thank you for being here. I noticed with interest in your written testimony that you said, and I'm quoting you now, the FBI uses all tools available at its disposal to combat domestic terrorism, which now apparently includes the crime of being Catholic. Let's talk a little bit about the FBI's egregious targeting of Catholic Americans. You have repeatedly been asked about the memo generated by the Richmond field office, we now know in collaboration with multiple other field offices, about recruiting sources in Catholic churches. You have repeatedly said that no human sources were approached. This is you on July the 12th in the House. You were asked directly by Jim Jordan, do you think that priests ought to be approached to give information on parishioners? You said, no, sir, no, sir. You went on to say, we do not recruit, open, or operate human sources. We do not report on religious organizations. You went on to say, This product, meaning the Richmond memo, has not resulted in any investigative action. But now we know that, in fact, FBI agents did approach a priest and a choir director to ask them to inform on parishioners. So were you lied to when you gave this testimony, or were you lying to Congress?
Neither. So your question conflates two different things. There's the intelligence product itself, which the Richmond field office created. It was written by, as our inspection found, by analysts in Richmond, reviewed by people in Richmond, and captioned Richmond field office product. Separately from that, there was an investigation of a specific individual who was amassing Molotov cocktails and posting about killing people, and it does not surprise me that there were people who knew that subject in that investigation, that is the guy building the Molotov cocktails and trying to kill people, that people talked to the witnesses who knew that person, and I think the product, the Richmond intelligence product, which cites that investigation, is actually pretty transparent about exactly what I just said.
No, I don't think so at all. In fact, the only reason we know this is a whistleblower has come forward and told the House under oath that the FBI went and interviewed priests and choir directors in the Richmond area. The House goes on to say that the FBI has repeatedly refused to disclose this information. The only reason we know it is because a whistleblower came forward with it. Just like the only reason we know about this memo is because a whistleblower came forward with it. How many other parishes around the country have priests or choir directors been approached? By the way, are Catholic choirs now, are they breeding grounds for domestic terrorism? Is this your latest theory? How many other parishes have FBI agents approached priests and choir directors to ask about parishioners?
Look, Senator, we do not and will not conduct investigations based on anybody's exercise of their constitutionally
You
protected
have done
religion.
so, and your memo explicitly asks for it. Your memo labels traditional Catholics as racially and ethnically motivated violent extremists in need of investigation. You have a list of churches, a list in the memo. You've repeatedly said we don't target churches, we don't list churches. They're listed in the memo. So how many other parishes have you gone to talk to choir directors, for heaven's sake?
As I've
know the answer to that question.
No, I don't know the answer to that question, but I can tell you that we don't investigate people for their exercise of their constitutionally protected religious expression. That particular intelligence product is something that as soon as I saw it, I was aghast. I had it withdrawn.
Really, you were aghast?
I was.
Oh, really? And
Yes,
what
sir.
have you done about it? Did you fire the people who wrote it?
No, I had it withdrawn.
Have you fired anybody involved in it?
Senator, if you would give me a chance to answer
That's a
your
yes or a
question.
no. It's not hard. Have you fired anyone involved in the writing of that outrageous memo, about which, frankly, you've repeatedly misled the public? Yes or no?
The individuals involved in that
Have you
product
fired
were
anyone?
not, just a minute, were not found to have engaged in any intentional or bad faith conduct. And in fact, Senator, a number of the individuals involved in writing that product in the Richmond office were themselves Catholic. So the notion that
So
they were
therefore
targeting their own faith
so they
is
have a
nonsense.
get out of jail free card. I see. I
They-
see. So
I
you're
did
immune
not
and
say
they're
that.
immune. So we shouldn't ask questions about it. You haven't done a darn thing. You haven't fired anybody. In fact, what the House found is, what is it? You admonished them. They were admonished. And their respective supervisors were told to engage with the Human Resources Division to ensure that deficiencies are addressed. Oh, well, I feel much better. They've been sent to bed without food. Good heavens, Director. This is one of the most outrageous targetings. You have mobilized your division, the most powerful law enforcement division in the world, against traditionalist Catholics, whatever the heck that means. And you're just told us you have not fired a single person. I mean, here, it gets worse. Your Richmond field office, they thought there was nothing wrong with this. The House interviewed the head of the Richmond field office. He testified. It's all here in the public report. I refer you to it, pages 12, 13, 14. He testified he saw no problem with this. He said he thought it was fine. In fact, we have internal memoranda of the members of the field office high-fiving. One peer reviewer, another member of the field office wrote, "I think this is a great product. I really enjoyed the read." Do you have a problem with systemic bigotry against Catholics in the FBI?
No.
What are you going to do about this? Are you going to fire these people or not?
Those individuals have all been admonished, and it is all going into their,
Admonished.
if you would let me finish my answer, it is all going into their annual performance reviews, which has direct impact on their compensation, among other things.
Oh, I see. Oh, I see. I see. So the 60 million American Catholics who now learn that your FBI has recommended that priests be recruiters and informants, your FBI has gone to priests, choir directors, but we're to feel better because you've admonished them for their wrongdoing.
You again are conflating two different
No, I'm
things.
not. I am taking your testimony where you said you do not. You said categorically, you said we do not go to priests and ask them about their parishioners. You said we do not. You didn't say we haven't. You didn't say we won't. You said we don't. It turns out you do, and you kept it from the public. You deliberately misled Congress about it, and the only reason we know about it is because a whistleblower came forward.
I just fundamentally disagree with your characterization.
Well, there's no characterization. The facts are the facts, and I fundamentally resent the fact that you have violated, if not the spirit, if not the letter, certainly the spirit of the First Amendment, and used your law enforcement agency against Catholics in this nation. Let me ask you about one.
Thanks, Senator Coons. Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director Wray, for being here. In a report issued declassified in August of 2021, the Director of National Intelligence stated, quote, FBI personnel conducted multiple queries of an individual who had the same last name as the FBI personnel conducting the query. And on further investigation, what they learned was that this query was made after this analyst at the FBI had a conversation with his own mother, and his mother expressed suspicions about his father having an affair, cheating on her, having an affair with another woman. And so as a result of that, they looked into it, and this particular analyst admitted that he ran the queries because of this tip from his mother that his dad was having an affair. Because I've got a lot of material to cover, I'd appreciate if you could give me a yes or no answer to this. Was that analyst terminated?
I'm not sure that I can recall the specific instance that you're talking about, so I'll have to go look at that and follow back up with you on that.
And do you know whether the analyst's security clearance would have been revoked?
Again, same answer, but let me check into that, and we'll circle back to whatever we can share.
Let me ask it to you this way, yes or no. Would abuse of Section 702 by an FBI employee, would that be something that would warrant the revocation of security clearance?
Well, certainly abuse. I think we'd have to know what the circumstances were. Sometimes people have used terms like abuse in this discussion when it's been something other than what I would call abuse, but that's why we have this accountability procedures that have cascading
This example that I've
consequences.
given you is abuse. I assume you would not disagree with that. Now, the September of 2023 PCLOB report disclosed 2 additional intentional incidents, intentional wrong searches from 2022. One instance from 2022 in which 2 analysts conducted queries seeking information about a person who was a potential tenant of a rental property owned by one of the analysts. And another instance from 2022 in which an NSA analyst conducted queries on 2 occasions seeking information about 2 individuals that the analyst himself had met through an online dating service. Were the FBI employees who conducted those 2 illegal searches, were they terminated?
Well, you lost me there for a minute. You referred to an NSA analyst?
Yeah. So NSA analyst, do you know whether anyone at the NSA was disciplined for that? And if they worked at the FBI, would they be subject to discipline?
Well, I don't want to get into hypotheticals, but as far as NSA analysts, I think that would be a question for NSA.
Now, were FBI employees involved in those? And if they had been, would their security clearances have been terminated?
Again, I don't want to get into hypotheticals, but we have both the disciplinary process, which is separate from the security clearance process, and somebody who who engages in a compliance violation related to 702 could be relevant to both.
I understand. Yeah. I would hope that the default answer would be yes, they'd be subject to having their security clearance stripped and be subject to dismissal. Now, in an April 2022 opinion, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court noted the following searches of Americans' communications. 19,000 donors to a particular congressional campaign, 133 Americans participating in civil unrest and protests, in the summer of 2020 and Americans who were in the vicinity of the Capitol, not necessarily inside the Capitol, but in the vicinity of the Capitol on January 6, 2021. The DNI's semi-annual assessment of Section 702 disclosed illegal queries conducted in 2019 to 2020, quote, using only the name of a U.S. congressman. The FISA court disclosed two particularly egregious searches from 2022. In June of 2022, an analyst conducted 4 queries of 702 information using the last names of a U.S. senator and of a state senator without further limitation. On October 25, 2022, a staff's operations specialist ran a query using the Social Security number of a state judge who had, quote, complained to FBI about alleged civil rights violations perpetrated by a municipal chief of police, close quote. Were the FBI employees who conducted those illegal searches terminated, or did they have their security clearances stripped? Yes or no?
Again, I don't know that I can speak to specific instances, but what I can tell you, and I think this is important to this exchange, is that all of the instances you just listed off all involve conduct that occurred before the reforms that we put in place.
Before the reforms you put in place, reforms, the text of which we don't even have access to. Reforms that you've put in place. I've been on this committee for 13 years. During the entirety of those 13 years, I've expressed concerns to FBI directors appointed by presidents of both political parties and 3 different presidential administrations. Every darn one of them has told me the same thing. Don't worry about it. We've got this taken care of. We've got new procedures. It's going to be different now. It's never different. You haven't changed. And you keep referring to these policies, these new procedures. We haven't seen that. We're not even allowed to have access to it. And we have absolutely no reason to trust you because you haven't behaved in a manner that's trustworthy. You can't even, as we sit here, tell me that people who intentionally, knowingly, deliberately violated the civil rights of American citizens, that they were fired or that they had their security clearance stripped. Now, in 2022, FBI and other agencies searched Americans' communications over 200,000 times, only 16 of which were evidence of a crime-only searches that returned information. I'd like to ask you to give a yes or a no answer to these questions. Were the 3 related batch queries consisting of over 23,000 separate queries relating to the events of January 6th, were those evidence of a crime-only queries, yes or no?
I don't know the answer to that.
The answer is no. I do know the answer. The answer is no. Were there 141 queries for the activists arrested in connection with the George Floyd protests here in Washington, D.C., evidence of a crime-only queries?
Those were non-compliant queries, and again, they all predate the reforms that we've put in place, which
echo other reforms that other FBI directors have told me about every darn year. How about the 19,000 donors to a political campaign? The answer there is no. What about the query for a sitting member of Congress? The answer there is no. What about the query involving a U.S. senator, which for all we know could be any one of us? The answer is no. And so what does that tell me? Well, what I'm hearing and what these data points all point to is that a warrant requirement or prohibition relating to quote-unquote evidence of a crime-only queries would not have been something that would have prevented any of the most egregious examples of the abuse that we've seen under Section 702. So the FBI is already required to obtain a court order in some circumstances before accessing the contents of Americans' communications in the context of 702. They're already required for that in some circumstances. Since 2018, how many times has that requirement been triggered, according to government reporting? Do you know?
You're talking about the so-called F2?
Yes.
Yeah, how many times has it been triggered?
Yes.
I think there have been 2 instances where I think is maybe the number.
103 times it's been triggered. And out of those 103 identified times, the FBI should have obtained a court order. How many times did the FBI actually obtain one? Do you know?
That, I think the answer is none.
0. So you're telling me that the FBI has completely ignored the limited court order requirement that it's already subjected to. You have the audacity to come here, and you told us that adding a warrant requirement to 702, even for queries involving U.S. persons on U.S. soil, that would amount to some sort of unilateral disarmament. You have a lot of gall, sir. This is disgraceful. The Fourth Amendment requires more than that, and you know it. I know every single time for centuries, even prior to the founding of this country, there were similar protections built into the laws of the United Kingdom before we became a country. Even then, the government was making the same darn argument you're making today, which is it's too hard. This would make it hard for the government. It's why we have a Constitution, sir, and you must comply with it.
Mr. Chairman, may I respond briefly? When you ask why are things different this time, I would point you again to the findings of the court and the department themselves, both of which have not been shy about identifying some of the same instances that you cited in our colloquy. They themselves have observed the effectiveness of the reforms, which is why the pre versus post date of the reforms becomes very significant. So that's number one. Second, as to your claims about constitutionality, I would point you back to what the case law actually shows on this subject, which is that no court has found 702 in its current form to be unconstitutional, and every court to have looked at it has found it to be constitutional.
Well,
and last point.
How lucky for you, because no one has standing to do that. No one knows when they're being surveilled. Yeah, that is not an argument, sir.
Last point, Mr. Chairman, is that in some of the instances, and you went through a number in your questions, in some of the instances in particular that I know about, those are instances where the queries were run in order to get to a public official, member of Congress, to warn them about foreign influences targeting them, and a warrant would not have enabled that.
We call those consent searches, and consent searches do not require a warrant, sir, and you know that. There is nothing that you have done that is not entirely within the FBI's control and supervision. You're asking me to believe something that is not believable because your agency has made it unbelievable, and I refuse to accept it.
Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.